Amen.
All right. Well, I've brought both of you here together because separately I've been interested in what both of you have had to say on the evolving topic of gender and gendered politics, and really what's going on, I would say, more broadly in the sphere of the discourse, as they say. The modern day politics, philosophy is all centered around what seems to be people's sexual identities. And I think we each have a different perspective on this, but I brought us together because Lav, you seem to be outspoken against a lot of what I would say is just people identifying as things for the sake of having a personality or something about them that they can align with politically. And so you've kind of rejected a lot of these gendered terms and the way people use them. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
And P.F. Jung, am I saying that right?
You can just call me Paul.
Okay, Paul.
That's easier.
Paul, I think you do come from a Jungian perspective. Is that right?
Jungian adjacent, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think I'm somewhere in between, or I understand both of those things to some degree. So I wanted to have this discussion to talk about what I would call the breakdown of language. And I think where we're seeing this happen is through the gendered language, through the identity politics. And what's going on, I think, is that our culture is too fractured and too broken apart. And that's why people are clinging to these sort of defined identities and labels, like non-binary or, whatever term you want to come up with. It's just...
Yeah, which just... FYI, for those who don't know, I am non-binary. I came out relatively recently on my channel. So,
yeah. And I want to start off. Oh,
real?
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay.
It'll be interesting how we talk about it. Yeah, if you go to my channel, it's the first video there. It says why I'm non-binary.
Interesting.
I could think of no better way to start this discussion than showing you guys this clip here. So I'm going to screen share it, and then let's all I want to analyze this. You still see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Faggot. And you know what?
Oh wait, am I going to get banned for this? Oh well.
Hopefully not.
Okay, hopefully not. I'm gonna.
It's in the context of educational.
Yeah,
all right. I suck dick for cock.
Suck dick
and
for
what
cock.
Do you do, a tech job? Hey. Pressing charges. Pressing charges. Pressing charges. Pressing charges. Hey, you attacked and disabled trans people, person, you piece of shit. You big man. Come and get me, bitch. Come and get me, bitch. You faggot. Come and get me.
So this clip has been going around, and I think it's funny. It's something we could point at, laugh at. It's a public freak out moment. But what's really going on here is this man, this whatever they choose to be identified. Let's just call her. Let's just call him her. She seems to identify as trans and is paraplegic to some degree, although maybe not fully. But they're having a freak out moment, and then you have this this elephant, this man or this whatever in an elephant suit, kind of like, putting their palm, like face palming, like, oh, this is too cringe for me. And then as this guy's freaking out saying he sucks dick for cock, this other guy, Fed posting, is recording them with his phone, gets his phone yanked out, starts a physical altercation. Meanwhile, the elephant is like, oh, this is, I gotta move on from this.
We literally can't, we cannot think about anything but the elephant in the room as of right now.
It's poetic. It is truly a beautiful Renaissance piece here. Because I think it's like, okay, in this elephant's mind, he's just coming here to have a good time. He's coming to the furry convention to hang out with other furries, have wild sex parties, or whatever he does, right? And this guy in the wheelchair, he's having a bad time. Maybe he feels left out, or whatever the problem is. He's the marginalized victim. He's playing the role of the victim here, and maybe he actually is a victim too. I'm not saying he's not, but that's...
Yeah, well, this is definitely a hate crime, what we just witnessed. That's undoubtedly the fact.
And Well, you think so? Seriously, or what do you mean?
No. Maybe I do. Maybe I do. I don't know.
Let's
I'd like
watch
to
it
hear
one more
your guys'
time.
opinions.
One more
Okay,
time.
yeah, let's watch it one more time. All right, because there's a lot going on here, but
Faggot. And you know what? I suck dick for cock. All right? I
That
suck
is so
dick for
strong.
cock.
Suck dick
And
for
what
cock.
do you do? Tech job? Hey. Pressing charges. Pressing charges. Pressing charges. Pressing charges.
hate crime.
Hey, you attacked a disabled trans people person.
a disabled trans person is how they identify, and that they were assaulted. Of course, this person was reaching for the other guy's phone, but regardless, it's like it's interesting to see this unfolding because there's nothing. How do I put it? It's like, of course, this would happen at a place that has the furry convention and all these other stuff because there's nothing stopping this from happening. Like, this is something that you talk about, Paul, and I think you made a good point. There was a video of that, I guess, trans-identifying person who wears diapers or whatever, and
The
you're
adult
like,
baby.
and you're saying that it's not that this person is so ridiculous or so insane or whatever. And it's like, okay, this is just a crazy person. It's like, no, this is actually the way culture is going, and it's not surprising that it is, because when you have people in elephant suits and it's just like a normal thing, well, yeah, why shouldn't people just roll up in wheelchairs and be trans identifying people that assault others and then want to press charges and whatnot? It's not like this is happening in a vacuum, like this is a picture of our culture. I truly believe that. And then we have like people onlooking and observing from the side, but I think this is as representative of anything and there's plenty of clips and things like this. It's not just about this convention, but yeah.
The otherkin identity is the logical conclusion of, well, we can identify differently. We can identify as a different sex. Okay. Can we identify as a different race? Maybe.
You can't identify as a different sex.
You can identify it. Like I can say I identify as a female.
Sure,
whether or not that
like,
means anything.
Nobody identifies. Very few people want to get rid of the language of like female and male. They just don't want you to bring it up. They don't want you to bring up that, and that you can be a trans woman, but also you're still male, right? Because it's like transphobic to bring up. But no one's like, I identify as like a biological female.
No, there are literally.
No, of course there are. No,
that's the norm. No, that's the norm now. That's.
You're wrong.
Wait. Sorry, I'm confused
Glink,
already.
Can I send you a? Clip?
What are you saying, Lav?
No, you're sending me. You're saying. Okay, I know that we share this space online, right? I have many transsexual friends. Most of them.
As do I.
Trans women. Not one of them identifies as a female. Not one.
Interesting. My friends are trans men. But go ahead.
I hate trans men. Just kidding. I don't. That was a joke. That was a bad joke. But it makes sense that you're friends with trans men and I'm friends with trans women. I love separatism. But
complimentary.
Yeah, but I do. Yeah, I think that's like very much not something that happens very often. And you can send me like you can show me a clip and give me like anecdotal evidence to whatever.
No. Well, fair enough.
It's like the Twitter. It's like Twitter people.
So yes.
Sure.
So let me clarify because I think you're right. I think there are definitely all of the. How do I say? This was the distinction I made in that video. Did you see that video, Lev, the adult baby one?
I've seen a multitude of adult baby trans videos.
Did you see the one I did? My commentary on it? Okay.
No, I don't. Sorry, we should have done like introductions. I don't know what really either of you do.
That's fair. Like I said, you guys are the e-celebs,
no,
and I'm the winner of the. I'm the winner of the golden ticket. I have a small YouTube channel where I do social commentary, political commentary. It's a lot of psychology and science and whatnot, and I also talk about my own personal experiences, like being non-binary and going to therapy and all that, which, again, I get a sense of disbelief from you that I'll tease out of you, but don't worry.
You're non-binary the way that everyone is non-binary.
That's correct, but I'm still non-binary, right?
Yeah, so we all are.
Exactly. So I'm non-binary. That was my
so
point.
I'm also non-binary.
In my opinion, yes.
Yeah, I think that we probably have the same.
So,
thoughts on
okay,
it.
I want to make a
Right.
point on that actually, which is the premise that I'm working on is, in a way, you guys are right that everyone is non-binary in the sense that no one is defined by their gender, and I think that's where a lot of this gendered language emerges out of, is because people are seeking an identity which is not defined, and so they come up. But the error they make, I think, is that they come up with a new identity which is now defined as gender fluid or this presenting male, presenting female, whatever it is. It's like, not in every case. Of course, this is acknowledging that there are quote unquote real trans people who suffer from real gender dysphoria and really feel like they're the opposite sex. But what I'm saying is that I think gender itself is, in a way, is a social construct. That's true. But a man can have feminine traits and a female can have masculine traits. And what really matters is not your gender, but the masculine and feminine and the balance of those two things. And everyone exhibits traits of both. And I think what's happening is the inversion of these roles, as in the masculine is now becoming the what has been more traditionally female, which is more submissive, more nurturing and caring and emotionally driven. And it's not necessarily bad things. I'm just saying these are, I would say there's masculine and there's feminine. And the females are now taking on more assertive, dominant roles in society, girl bossing, making lots of money. They're the breadwinners now. They're running corporations or they want to be. Of course, people might say, well, the patriarchy, the men are still holding all the most powerful positions. Fine, but culturally what's shifting is the inversion of those two roles, barring like the actual small 0.1% of people that hold all the power anyways. But even there, you see women as well, Angela Merkel and stuff like that. So that's what seems to be going on here, is that these roles are reversing. And as a result, I think people are choosing to identify so strongly with their minute differences and how they express their masculine or feminine side, because anyone can be anywhere along the spectrum of those two things. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah. So you said that you think that the masculine is kind of adopting sort of what was previously the feminine kind of characteristics, right?
Yeah.
Here's how I would lay it out, to clarify the point about being non-binary, as Lav correctly deduced. I do think there is sex and there is gender. Sex is biological. There's male and female, and there's some intersex people. Gender is so sex is down here, and then gender is up here. It's a top layer. And gender, there's masculine and feminine, and masculine and feminine, they are culturally, shaped to some degree, although not completely, because clearly the reason we associate aggression and strength with masculinity is because males on average are stronger physically, and so naturally there's some conditioning there. And the same reason we associate like sensitivity to emotion on a feminine side is like, well, from a personality research perspective, women are more sensitive to negative emotion, which correlates exactly with like increased rates of anxiety and whatnot. And there's like, okay, clearly there's biological reasons to that. If you're gonna bear a child, in the course of evolutionary history, if you were the primary caretaker of a child, it's probably a good idea that on average you're more attuned to emotional needs and whatnot of an infant and whatnot. And so they're opposites. Now, to your point though, the reason that I'm non-binary is the same reason that everyone is non-binary, is because everyone has both masculine and feminine characteristics within them, right? Like everyone has some degree of assertiveness, and everyone has some degree of, sensitivity to emotion and whatnot. And this is going back to Jung. Like this is a very old idea. This is not a new idea. This is a idea that people like Jordan Peterson, who are supposedly these, bigoted right-wing people, who believe is that there's a masculine aspect to all female psyches, and there's a feminine aspect to all masculine psyches. That's the anima and the animus. It's a very old idea. You see it in mythological representations and whatnot.
Yin-yang symbol is a good example of this.
Yes, yin and yang it's exactly the same thing. And the point is that they're complementary, right? And so the idea is, yes, I can be both aggressive and empathetic. But in any given moment, sometimes I can only be one or the other. And so conceptually, there's still opposites, right? The idea, I usually give as an example is like, if you're going to render judgment on someone, like let's say legally, you can either be merciful or you can be just. And to be just would be to give the person the punishment they deserve. To be merciful would be to exempt them from the punishment. You can only make either one decision or the other. You can either only be merciful or only just in any given moment. And so conceptually, they're opposites, right? And that's the masculine-feminine dichotomy. And I think the problem is, well, there's a lot of problems. I do think that there is someone put it, the best aspects of masculinity became normalized, so to speak, in that we all celebrate the traditionally positive masculine characteristics in males and females. And now all we have for masculinity is the toxic element left. And so then there's this like attack on masculinity, so to speak, in which, people are, what would you say? Discouraged from, if I'm in a meeting and there's women talking about their experience and I might disagree with them, it's like, well, I'm less inclined to share because I don't want to be seen as, oh, well, here's the straight white guy giving his opinion and whatnot. So there's a variety of cultural, some top-down aspect to it that's kind of screwing with things. But I don't know. Lev, what do you think?
I mean, I agree with everything that you've said. The non-binary thing, that's funny because last week I started identifying as non-binary as sort of like a gag because it's like, yeah, I'm as non-binary as any of you are. Like,
I'll tell you, cosmic, first the non-binary identification, then the cars die.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, no, but yeah, that's what I was like. None of it makes any fucking sense to me, and I really think that it comes from just an idea to like Glink was saying earlier, to like identify as, you want to find your in-group, you want to find, especially when there's social capital right now, to be something different other than the binary, and especially, so many young people are doing it. It makes sense to some extent, like I get why it's happening, but it is just like fucking, like, I've said this before, but if my kid ever came up to me and was like, I'm non-binary, mom, I'd be like, oh god, I'd be like, that's so, I was like, fuck, I raised you to be boring so that you have to like focus on something like your gender.
Yeah. Right.
Like,
why
are you focusing? It's literally what that means to me is that like you have no personality, because gender is like personality essentially, right? Like gender's a theory. It's like it's assigning traits to like certain sexes, which like we can assign some, and not even assign, like some obviously evolutionarily like we're a bit different, but the female and male brain are so similar that it's like
they're more the same than they are different, like statistically speaking. So,
and there's like slight aberrancies, and then there's generalizations, like more women probably want a child rear, or like are more nurturing, more like have higher EQs, right? But there's not like this big female male brain thing, and it just seems like, I don't know, it just seems very silly to me.
First off, to the first point, I'd say really what it is it's cisgendered people, quote unquote, wanting to buy victim points and social capital. And so if you call yourself non-binary, then you don't have to get any of the surgeries. You don't have to go through the actual pain of, okay, I'm going to go through these difficult surgeries to rectify body dysmorphia. I'm non-binary, so now I'm part of the LGBTQ2SIA plus community, whatnot, and then that gives you all these victim points. And it's like, and people who identify...
People will not acknowledge that victim points exist, and I think that that's ridiculous also. Like, when you try to bring this up, people are like, nobody's doing that, and it's like, oh my god, you have your hands over your eyes.
Yeah. And like, it's... Or go ahead.
Are either of you aware about do either of you know about the fall of Rome?
Where that it fell?
Particularly.
Well,
yes, it's Decadence, right? That's Camille Paglia and all that all of the weird obsession with like sexual.
Yeah, they had a similar. I have a very like cursory level understanding of it, but to my knowledge, yeah, like historically, what happened with Rome is that because of their excess, people had the luxury to obsess over these minute details and differences about their identity, about their gender, about their sex. And ironically, that came at the time at Rome's fall. Like, it came as at the end of the empire, because it's a sign of the fall when, and it's like people acknowledge that, like, oh, we live in the first world. This is a first world conversation. And it so is. All of this is a first. Nobody in fucking Africa gives a shit about gender dysphoria or about trans people, any of this. None of this fucking matters, because they have to survive. They have to put food on the fucking table, you know? And it's like, I think it's just a global tragedy that the most privileged people waste their mental energy on the most nonsensical things. Like, all of this is basically just a giant ego stroking contest. I think it's just a bunch of people who are confused by or controlled by language.
I agree. Maybe not controlled by language. I think it is an ego thing, but I think it's an ego thing in the way that like Eckhart Tolle describes ego, which is like, I actually have like a lot of empathy for these people who are like so stuck in ego because they live their whole lives, you know, completely reliant on the like others' external view of them, which is actually very sad, right?
Yeah, that's...
So, like, so I don't have like this propensity to like be angry about it because I'm thinking about it in a way that's like, okay, how sad is it that these people can't, like, that they can't just have a personality, can't have the wants that they want. Like, I mean, it's 2022. Like, if you want to be a man and wear a dress and look like a girl, or what is like colloquially seen as a girl, like, you can do it. Like, there's nothing stopping you besides, you know, bigotry, but bigotry is going to happen no matter what, right? So it's like, it just becomes this thing when you're like forcing other people to like call you these pronouns, or like forcing other people to like do all these things.
Wait, then why do you disagree that people are controlled by language? Because that's exactly the mechanism.
Because I think that people are controlled by insecurity. I think that this is a mental illness problem. Like, I think that this is not necessarily mental. You're not necessarily mentally ill to like be non-binary, but to
everyone's mentally ill to some degree.
Sure, but to seek outside validation for something as like integral as your identity, like that's like extreme mental illness to me.
Yeah. I think there's an inherent desire, or a what would you say, a naturally evolved desire to want to be part of a struggle that is bigger than you. So like the propensity to be tribal, which is like, that's just inbuilt in our nature so deep that like we see it in sports, you see it in everything. The tribe is bigger than you as an individual. And thus, when you adopt a certain identity, oh, I'm this identity, or as an ally, which that terminology is so funny because it's a metaphor of war. Like, oh, I'm your ally in a struggle, like a warlike struggle, a tribal war. It's like that, those mechanisms that evolved to want to be part of something bigger than yourself, which was the tribe, so that you as a tribe could survive better as an individual. That mechanism is what's being active when someone wants to, okay, I'm going to identify as this gender or whatever, or be an ally, and now I'm going to go out and fight, and I'm going to get other people to use the language that I want them to use, because it's not about just, well, let's just make it, you know, everyone happy. It's no, this is a fight. This is a fight against oppression. That's the central theme, is its liberation of identity and whatnot. So I think there's a specific psychological mechanism that is associated with, you know, tribalism and wanting to be something big that is being hijacked by this.
You guys are both right, but the reason I'm saying it's people controlled by language is because what you're talking about is the psychological need to be part of an in-group is being controlled by the language of gender identity, which is constantly shifting, and new words are constantly being introduced into the lexicon because
yeah, I think that's a fair way to characterize
of our environment. And what is our environment? Right now, we're looking at reflections on a screen of people talking that is representative of our modern day discourse. Like, people live in isolated bubbles of reality thanks to the modern internet. And this is where they form these abstract and ungrounded identities. And then the language is updated through our communications to enact that. And then when someone says, and I don't have a problem with calling someone who identifies as whatever, a female or male, that's a female, as her or them or whatever, because I have a, you've mentioned this, Paul, in your video. It's like, I don't have a problem with that specific person to disrespect them in that way. But,
yes, it depends on, we can go into that later, but
I think at a societal level, that is a mechanism through which to control people's thoughts and the way in which they perceive reality. because the way in which we perceive reality is through language. Most people,
Yes.
the vast majority of people, and maybe we're capable of more, but everyone thinks about things through the words that they know. So when you control
and
the
when
words
you're isolated in these bubbles and you don't have the struggle of survival that you were talking about in terms of like, well, in Africa where, you know, in the poorest parts of Africa where they don't have these problems, it's like, but the desire, because they're solving the problems that are in front of them. Well, the problems that are in front of the people who are terminally online is not a struggle of survival. It's a struggle of, how do I interact with this purely conceptual universe? And that conceptual universe is constructed of language, not physical objects and whatnot. So yeah, I think that's
exactly right. So it's like people are more and more concerned with more and more abstract things as the world around them is crumbling, essentially. Like as we need people to be concerned about real things more than ever right now, I would say.
Right. Yeah. And I just moved, and one of the things that I resolved that I would do is I would try, like, I got this new camera to do videos. I'm like, well, I got this new camera. I'm gonna go take a photography class. I'm gonna go out there, put myself out there, and actually do shit in real life, which, you know, I never really did, and I was kind of viewed it like in college, like I'm not gonna join any clubs or whatnot. You know, that's what the lame kids do. And now it's like, you know, I'm like, oh my god, how stupid was I? Like, this is like, go out in the world, you know, go to the bar and just, you know, if there's sports on, go sit there and watch it. If there's people there, go talk to them. It's like, it's just stuff that I feel embarrassed that I'm discovering this in a way, you know, at 25 or whatnot. It's like, but it goes back to the point of like, well, my whole previous struggle was, well, how do I, you know, interact with the Twitter space as it explodes during the pandemic, which that's a, you know, a physical reality that forced us even further into this kind of conceptual hole. But
I don't think anyone's opinion on anything political matters online if they don't have a strong foundation of real life experiences, because then it's like all they're dealing with is abstractions and they've never had any grounding experience.
I think the danger of that is you underestimate the degree to which it only takes a very small percentage of loud voices to alter the discourse for mainstream society, right? Like, we're at a point now where it's like, you saw the Jon Stewart
yeah, I did. I saw that
interview. Lad, did you see the interview that Jon Stewart did with that Republican?
Yeah, that's a good place to take the conversation. Actually, explain that if you don't mind.
Should we just show the first 30 seconds of it?
Yeah. Do you have it? Isn't it about trans kids or about hormone?
It's about Jon Stewart is essentially criticizing states that want to make it illegal to perform surgery on children. And I believe it includes puberty blockers and other treatments, which is where it gets squirrely, but let me share it. I think I have to do application. Can you guys see it?
Yeah.
Why would
You hear it?
the
Yeah, I can hear it
state
too.
of Arkansas step in to override parents, physicians, psychiatrists, endocrinologists who have developed guidelines? Why would you override those guidelines?
Well, I think it's important that all of those physicians, all of those experts, for every single one of them, there's an expert that says we don't need to allow children to be able to take those medications. That there are
Which is true.
instances where...
But you know that's not true. You know it's not for everyone. There's one. These are the established.
Well, I don't know that that's not true. I don't know that...
Then why would you pass a law then if you don't know that that's true? Wouldn't you?
Well, I
have
know
done
that
so?
there are doctors and that we had plenty of people come and testify before our legislature who said that, we have 98% of the young people who have gender dysphoria, that they are able to move past that. And once they have the help that they need, no longer suffer from gender dysphoria. 98%
Wow.
without that medical treatment.
That's an incredibly made up figure. That doesn't comport with any of the studies or documentation that exists from these medical organizations. What medical association are you talking about?
Well, which one is he talking about?
Exactly. That's
really,
bullshit.
really. I also really wonder if Jon Stewart would be talking to someone this way if it weren't a female. But
the narcissistic comedian charm of just that's
Yeah,
an incredibly
the way,
made up
dude,
statistic,
it's
which is a
not-
lie. That's not a made up statistic. That's
It's
an
not.
accurate
No,
statistic.
I've seen it. Well, the statistic is a little iffy because it's one
80%.
study, right? It's one study, and it's one study, and it's also like it's about dissenting. So it's people who even thought about it at all, and not people who have like transitioned and then gone through. It's like
Hold on.
The figure is large. The figure is large. It's certainly not 98, and I don't know if it's around 80. Certain things are like as low as 20, and then as high as 90. So it's a whole thing. But to say that there's no counter data is insane on Jon Stewart's part.
I need to fact check Lav here in real time.
There's lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Yeah.
And then there's Lav's bigoted, questioning my non-binary identity off the bat.
I would say that's a propaganda piece, just on the first glance.
That is. Well, and so this is the response. Okay. So she said 98%, and you're right. It's not as high as 98%. Here's the reality.
Doesn't comport with any of the studies or documentation that exists from these medical organizations. What medical association are you talking about?
And the majority of the follow-up studies of young children with gender dysphoria or who had a lot of marked gender nonconformity found that most of them did not grow up and continue to have gender dysphoria. So one common percentage that one sees is 80% of children desist.
Yeah,
they
the
don't
desisting
persist.
one.
Now,
Multiple
if
studies.
gender identity
But the biggest
was
one,
fixed
the highest number,
and
the
locked in
desisted
at
study
the age
is
of
not as accurate because it's anyone who had, like he said earlier, it's anyone who had like a gender, like any sort of thoughts about their gender. This isn't
They
people
they didn't meet the DSM criteria for gender dysphoria. in
Sure.
youth. Yes.
Sure. So this is everyone who even thought about, I don't really know. It's not people who are like these are not like the transsexuals,
Where
right?
are you getting this
These are,
information from? Out of curiosity, did someone
No,
give a
look up-
debate about this?
No,
With
you
someone?
should. Yes, and I came into it with the same knowledge as you did, and then I read the dissenting paper. I read the dissenting paper. Let me find it. Hold on.
Because this Ken Zucker guy, I watched and he specifically pointed to what you're saying. Is some of those studies they had desistance rates. He said as low as 50%. And
Yeah.
one of the criticisms was that, well, the people in these studies, some of them were just like basically said, I feel like a girl like one time,
Yes.
and then they were included in the study, which would artificially inflate the desistance rate.
So it's 65 to 94% out of like a bunch of things. But overall, I think we both agree that like a lot of children, regardless of the number, a lot of children, definitely the majority of people who have strange feelings.
let's say the low end. Let's say 50% is the low end. It's
Sure.
it's overwhelmingly likely.
That's still
based on
that is still extremely
That means
high
one out of
percentage.
two, that means one
Yeah.
exactly. That means 1 out of every 2 children that get put on puberty blockers and continue on to cross-sex hormones and then continue on to whatever surgeries they may or may not take will end up regretting it. And
Yes.
from what I've seen, going through like the detransition subreddits and listening to the stories, the time it takes, if I had to ballpark the average, this is not a peer-reviewed study, but I think this is, there are gonna be peer-reviewed studies that are gonna show this soon enough. It takes about 4 to 6 years for someone to realize, oh crap, this was a full-on mistake. They usually they start the puberty blockers, they do the cross hormones, and then mid-20s or late 20s, they realize it's a mistake. So there's a 4 to 5 year lag that is going to screw over so many kids. And then all of the freaking narcissists who get online and say, well, the peer-reviewed studies currently suggest that there's no regret rate. It's like, first off, that's bullshit. And I am waiting, and I'm trying to set up some debates with the people who claim to know anything about studies to say, look, pick the 3 best studies that demonstrate that there are positive effects of doing these interventions on children that are long-term. They don't exist. I'm saying it right now. I fully believe they do not exist. And they're just peddling that shit. And then you know what's going to happen 2-3 years from now? When the studies come out that prove this was bullshit, they're just going to say, oh, well, it looks like we were wrong. Looks like the peer-reviewed studies now say that it actually is a bad idea to transition. And no one's going to be held accountable. And all of the kids who listen to these people.
Do you see that, dude? That's happening right now. There are every week, 3 new detransitioners make a YouTube video that blows the fuck up.
Exactly.
And they're like, no. And then they're like, no, but the stats. They're like, no, the stats. And then you look at the stats, and it's like, also, you have to think about how they're getting detransition stats. Like, all these detransitioners are like, I got my top surgery. The doctor never fucking spoke to me again.
And they say that in all the studies.
Yes,
right.
It's all self-reports. We have no idea of knowing the real detransition numbers. We have literally no fucking idea of knowing them. So it's just, I know. And I think obviously there are people, and here's another thing. I think that the detransition happens more amongst females. We know that this is the case. I think this is why, well, my stance has always been that I don't think that you should give HRT to females under 18, but that you should consider it for males under 18, because obviously if you go through a male puberty, testosterone is way more strong of a hormone.
We must have been listening to the same interviews, because yes, I agree 100%.
Yeah, and obviously, and I also think, to be honest, like, a lot of, you see that person who just came out, it blew up on Twitter this week, where they're like AFAB person going bald because of testosterone, and was like, I regret it. I regret it.
Them. Yes.
Yeah, which like this, females don't realize that like how attractiveness plays like a big social role, right? So I also think that like,
you don't think females recognize that?
I don't think that people who are inherently trying to, obviously if you have like a female who doesn't subscribe to that and who wants to transition into a male, no, they don't really understand it, right? Like they don't know how much privilege you have as an attractive woman versus like an ugly man. They don't. You have no way of knowing until you're there, right? But that's why also I think that, I think ultimately, and this is a hot take, but if you're like a trans woman and you're an attractive trans woman, even if you sort of regret it, you're going to be like, okay, but I'm still like an attractive woman in society, which I think is oftentimes maybe a lot better, right? Oftentimes a lot easier, rather than all these, AFAB people coming out that are like, fuck, I can't be a man. Nobody sees me as a man. Assigned female at birth. I hate it. But that's what
I wouldn't even buy into that framing. Assigned female at birth.
I know. The assigned female
OFAB.
Sure. I agree with you, but AFAB is just like what it's colloquially, known as, whatever the fuck that means. But yeah, so I think there's something to be said about that. But I think it's crazy how people are so hyped to give even puberty blockers to some extent, right? Because if you're on a puberty blocker and you see all of your friends go through puberty, and all of your friends are growing up and their hormones are changing their bodies, you're going to be socially and developmentally behind. What is keeping you from not transitioning at that point? Because you're just like not, even if you don't necessarily feel trans anymore, you're just like developmentally behind. How do you know not to go to the next step, which is hormone replacement therapy? Like it's
which the statistic is real quick. I think it's 95+% of people that take puberty blockers
end up taking HRT.
So people will say, well, puberty blockers are different from hormones. It's like, no, not really, because 95% of people that take them will go on to hormones. So you might as well be talking about the same thing at that point.
Yeah.
The whole point about statistics is completely hypocritical, because the entire trans movement is about being statistical marginalized anomalies that we should be celebrating. The whole culture is based on marginalized statistical anomalies. So like
that's why the other kin and furries are the natural emergence, because once trans is in the normal, then you have to go marginalize further from furries.
But the way out of the insanity The way out of that insanity is the detransition, which is also maybe, let's say, a marginalized small percentage of the trans people. But if we're to be championing the voices of the marginalized and hearing what they say, if that piece was worth anything, if that wasn't a complete propaganda piece, they wouldn't be interviewing while I talk like this, governor of Arkansas. They'd be interviewing the fucking detransition kids and be like making a tearful tearjerker out of it, you know? But
the head of the Human Rights Campaign complained to CNN or not CNN, 60 Minutes, because they did a documentary about detransitioners. And the head of the Human Rights Campaign, said, well, this might be used to fuel anti-trans hate. It's like, you scumbag that you would hide the truth of. And you're right. I think detransitioners, and the language has just become so freaking hijacked and bullshit that nothing means anything anymore. But like, you talk about genuinely marginalized people who don't have a voice, it's detransitioners right now. And yeah, it's like
here's another
yeah,
thing.
you're gonna get canceled because I support trans people. It's like, oh wow, brave take. No, it's like no. I want to stand up to some of this bullshit because it's hurting kids. That's the shit that will actually get you in trouble.
Here's another thing also, though, is that by extension of these people coming out, detransitioners coming out, it does make trans people, it does make it harder for actually trans people to get gender affirming care, because all of this
gender affirming care.
Yeah, so like all of this shit is so sensationalized.
That
everyone's gonna make legislation on it, right? So then they're gonna, but
the reaction.
Yes, exactly. So we can't it needs to be like a cultural conversation more so than like legislation. Always, I think.
I think yes.
I think that trans people really do exist, and I think that they should have access to gender affirming care. Like I said, like HRT, after being 18 for females and whatever. But it obviously, when you overcorrect, everyone overcorrects. So I don't think making like a hit piece with detransitioners is the best move, but I also don't think what Jon Stewart's doing is the best move either. I think there's like a very happy medium.
Yeah.
But it's hard to have that happy medium when you get slammed immediately for even having a slight dissension of opinion.
I disagree with that. I actually disagree. I think having an entire piece on detransitioners would be completely fair game. Because if you have a problem,
no, I agree in the sense that if people keep making, there has to be obviously like we need to push as much idea into the marketplace of ideas as possible.
I think it is absolutely wrong for states to do. I think that the Republican woman in that is wrong for pushing the legislation that she did. No state should make a law that says you cannot get this surgery.
Exactly.
As even getting in the way of parents. What should happen is laws should be passed to make it easier for the people who get those surgeries to sue the surgeons who screwed it up. Because that's the only, you can't legislate your way out of a mass psychosis. So the only way to stop this from happening is to offset the profit incentive, because there's a massive profit incentive behind prescribing hormones and doing this is all medical industrial complex. All the stuff the left used to talk about, it's like, it was pretty obvious back then. So you have to create a financial cost for the people who are essentially pushing out all these surgeries and then absolving themselves of all the risk because, hey, I do the surgery on you, you're now a permanent medical patient. And, well, right now the laws are such that it's not that easy to sue me because you gave informed consent even though you were 8 years old or whatever. Yeah. So there should be laws put in place that says, look, any surgeon, if you're willing... If you're going to do liposuction on an anorexic, technically you're allowed to do that. But if that surgery causes negative health outcomes in the future and it's proven, then you get sued up the fucking wazoo. And if you're a gender surgeon who says, "Oh, I'm going to surgically remove the genitals of this 13-year-old," it's like, yeah, okay, you can do that if you truly believe that's fine and the parents give consent and the child gives informed consent. But if it turns out that it's wrong, it's your ass on the line in a serious way. You have to offset the profit incentive that's driving this, because it's follow the money. It's all the money. It's medical industrial complex.
It's true.
It's like, and Jon Stewart is out shilling, and it's like, oh. That's an incredibly made-up statistic. It's like, that's the narcissistic comedian charm that the average person, if I was watching that and didn't know anything, I'd go, oh, wow. Jon Stewart, as he always does, is owning the conservatives. He's fighting on behalf of progressive causes. Little do I know, he is the best. He is the most valuable marketing asset the medical industrial complex has now, and Big Pharma in particular, that sells all the hormones and whatnot. Yeah. That's what bothers me, among other things.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up, maybe this would be an interesting discussion. So, Lav, you quit OnlyFans and you made like a very public statement about that. What's your summation of the OnlyFans, the ills of OnlyFans for society? Like, why? What do you think the problem with it is that you left it and made a public thing about it?
So I left it and made it public, and then I came back to sex work. So I think
as of pretty recently, right? We caught you in the middle of a interesting controversy.
In a resurgence. So I quit. So I'd been doing sex work since I was almost 18.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I was funneled into it because, I grew up super poor. I grew up, no education, abused, orphan, typical sex worker backstory, right? I get into it. I can't stop. I make fast money. I become addicted to the fast money. I change my whole life around because all of a sudden now I'm making 150K a year. Now I'm making 300K a year. Like it was a whirlwind. And all the while I was like, something is wrong here. It never felt like my choice. Right? It felt like something I was funneled into. And then I got engaged and I was like, okay, do I want to be a mom doing this? Not that there's nothing wrong with that inherently, I don't think. But I was like, do I want to be a mom doing this? Right? Like, do I want to be doing this with my kids around? Do I want them to like see my little set? Do I want, what happens if their friends find it, right? I'm like, I don't know if I want to be that person. And I said that before and everyone's like, well, maybe society will be different. It won't be. It won't be. People fucking hate sex workers. So if you're a sex worker and you heard that and you want to have a whatever. Anyway, I quit because I was really traumatized. I felt like extremely traumatized by all of it. I got into OnlyFans. I was doing IRL sex work, and then I got into like OnlyFans on a friend, like from a friend who was also on OnlyFans. So then it became like literally like a pipeline. Like all of my friends were doing it, and then it became easy because then I also wasn't putting my safety at risk because I could do it online, and I was making so much money, and then everyone was like, this is empowerment. So I was like, hell yeah. And it all culminated like 2 months ago when I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I cannot do this anymore. And so I was like, okay, and I was reading a lot of feminist theory, a lot of radical feminist theory, which I don't know about that now. But yeah, a lot of radical feminist theory that was like, you're always sublimating yourself for men by being sexual objects for them, which to some extent I still do agree with, right? But no woman is above sublimating herself for men, right? We live in a capitalist society. But I took 2 months off, which is a long time in sex work years. I've aged 5 years. And I posted a photo of myself topless. I don't know how explicit I could get, but I posted a photo of myself topless, and I really liked it. And it wasn't for money. I just did it for attention, basically. And I was like, oh, I miss this. I miss this feeling, which who's to say if that's healthy or not, right? And I wrote like a little essay, and I talked about that a little bit, like, I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Like, do I like people looking at me naked because I did it for so long, or do I like it just because intrinsically I like it? Who's to say? But I do like it, and so I'm like, okay. I miss the money. I do like doing this, but I hate OnlyFans. I hate their marketing schemes, so I will never join OnlyFans again. They have something called like a referral program. So like you get a fraction of like someone's income if you refer them to the fucking website, which is like evil to me. So many sex work Twitter is all like, oh my God, you should do this if you're in a hard place. Like it's a really great way to like make quick money and like it's really easy. It's not. It takes a toll on you, right? Like even that many eyes on you takes a toll on you. This is like the same thing if you're like an influencer, right? It's the same toll. It's not more of a toll because it's sexual. It's just a toll. So all these things culminated, and I was just like, maybe I can make a positive space at least where I'm doing the things that I want to do and making money from it. Because it does turn me on to be seen naked. So I like it, right? Might as well make money. And also, this is what I believe right now. My stance is I'm very pro gatekeeping. I'm like very pro gatekeep. A lot of people are like, you're doing it. Why can't other people do it? And I'm like, because I'm 24 now. I'm smart enough to make my own decisions, right? I wasn't at 18. If I could go back to my 18-year-old self, I'd be like, don't fucking do that shit. You're a dumbass. Don't do that shit. Go to school, get a job, do something, right? Do anything else. If anything, I think that I'm a great show of everything I've said is that it is fucking hard to get out of sex work. I spent 6 years of my life in sex work, and it is impossible to get out of. You become addicted to the money. I can't get like a normal job because I have a heart condition. So like, my stance is still that there should be other systems put in place, like social institutions put in place, or even, I really believe in UBI. I think that there should be things so that, women don't have to sell naked photos of themselves, right? Because ideally, women shouldn't have to in a tough spot. The first thing they go to shouldn't be like, oh, sexualizing myself for money, right? Like, that's not great for society. That means that something is wrong with society. I don't think it means that women's sexuality is what's wrong, but I think it means that we do not have enough things in place to like catch people who are going to fall into situations like this. But yeah, I think I can still do those things and have those messages while still making money. I don't know. I also want to come from a more like educational and artful standpoint where I was like, at first I was doing a lot of stuff that was like it felt very performative. Like I felt like a porn actress. Whereas like now I feel like I'm making a choice to show people my naked body in a way that I'm like not posing for them. I'm not pretending to like enjoy things I'm not enjoying. I'm going to do more educational content like, 1 of 4 women who are 24 have never made themselves orgasm, right? So I'm interested in making like sexpert videos, like how to help yourself orgasm, or anatomy videos, or even like how to do certain sexual acts I'm interested in. But yeah, I don't know where I'm at with the whole thing. I'm in this like, I'm very black-pilled on it because I fought for 2 months valiantly against sex work. And everyone just fucking shit on me, and everyone was like, no one gives a fuck. And I was like, okay, well, if no one gives a fuck, do I?
You had to come back.
It's a weird place to be. But I definitely am still anti-free porn. I will always be, I think, anti-free porn. I think that it should be way harder to get access to free porn, if not impossible to get access to free porn. I'm also pro getting rid of OnlyFans, or like referral programs, or any website that takes 20% of your fucking income on your nudes. Like OnlyFans is effectively just a big fucking pimp. The CEO who just retired last year made
effectively a big pimp, but yeah
sure, of course. But but then it becomes, it's just one man made $500 million in like 3 years off of all these 18-year-old girls coming onto OnlyFans and selling photos of their body, right? Which is fucking insane. And then now it's a woman. Now the CEO is a woman, so everyone's like, oh, OnlyFans, very woke. What the fuck ever. Yeah, of course, that's, textbook liberalism. But I don't know. I think that the age of consent for those sort of, I think you should have a license. You need a license to be a sex worker. I would advocate for that. So more gatekeeping, and that you should also be older than 23.
So it sounds like you want more government regulation with sex work.
I do.
Which I agree with too. Just to be clear, I'm not a libertarian, even though I made the government as a pimp joke.
Yeah.
Well, I've got some thoughts on this.
Okay, yeah, Paul, why don't you share what you think about the culture of sex work?
Sure. Well, I'd say thank you, Lev, for sharing all that. It was interesting because you said capitalism a couple times. When people, I've said this before, of like, there's nothing that makes me more sympathetic to the hardcore Marxists than something like OnlyFans, which is the literal commodification of human intimacy. Mm-hmm. And sex is one thing, like porn, okay, that's one thing, but like OnlyFans where it's like decentralized and it's like, well, wait, I can send you a personal message and now we can have like a conversation or something like that. It's like, that's creepy. I didn't know about the referral bonus. That's extra creepy. That is, I could see so many situations where you have like a girl who's like, oh, there's something that I just feel like I don't want to do this. I might regret this. But her friend is like, hey, it's empowering. It's totally cool. I did it. It's cool. Misery loves companion. If my nudes are out there, it's like, well, I kind of want, my friend will be out there too. And it's just like that's
kept telling me, in 10 years, everyone's going to have an OnlyFans. So everyone's nudes are going to be out. And I was like,
Yeah. Well, I do
Now
think I think everyone will have nudes out there on the internet, whether or not they're
Sure.
selling them.
Sure.
You know,
It-
not
it
me,
is-
of course, but
yeah.
but but
Sure.
but oh shit, what was I going to say? Capitalism. Da, 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 da. I do think that you said gatekeeping. You're pro gatekeeping. I think that's
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to phrase it too, because it's like there are some people. I view the same thing about like polyamory. It's like, well, should people be in a poly relationship or monogamy? It's like most people should be monogamous because that's just how we evolved. There's a distribution in personality types. Some people are very creative, and some people need so much novelty in their life that they need to bring in a third person in the bedroom. And some people are capable of doing OnlyFans. But that's a outlier in the same way that there's some people who are 6'8" and there's some people who are 5'2". It's like we shouldn't design society around the extremes, right? And the gatekeeping point, I think, is acknowledging that of, hey, we can recognize this is like, you should only be doing this if you are 100% certain that this is what you that you're capable of doing it. And you said you're 24 and you've had a unique experience because you went through it, so you're able to see it directly.
Yeah, that's what I was also just about to say. Like, if I at 18, I was not someone who was ready, but now unfortunately, I've conditioned myself to the point where I'm like, yeah, I can do this job because I've been doing it for so fucking long. But it's like, do I want other women to go through like 6 different ego deaths in 6 years to get to this point where I'm like, I'm obviously in intensive therapy working through all of this. Like, most people don't have the tools that I have. Most people going on OnlyFans are making $100 a fucking month. Like, I was the outlier making more than $150K a year. Like, obviously,
wild,
yeah, of course. But it's like, I've gotten to this point where it's like, okay, I might as fucking well, because I've already dealt with all the bad, might as well reap some fucking good from it. But if I can stop women from getting into this cycle, absolutely, I will still be anti-OnlyFans. To some extent, I'm still anti-sex work because I don't want women to end up like me. I don't think that makes me a hypocrite. I think that just makes me a fucking example. Right?
I was going to use the
but if you're an
analogy.
example that's making a lot of money and is like happy with your life, it is.
I'm very open about not being happy with my experiences though. Like,
okay, but if somebody was like, I'm just saying, you could always find people that are like role models, right? That'll be like inspiring to.
Yeah, I get mad at them. I got Madame Genevieve. She was the first person who fucking came out when I announced that I was doing a Patreon again. She was like, but you got so mad at me. And I was like, yeah, because you're fucking retarded. I was like, you come up here and you're like, this is empowerment. I love it. And I'm like, no, you fucking don't. This job sucks. This job sucks. Like any other job, it sucks.
Yeah, you are definitely going to, and I'm sure you've obviously already gotten the criticism that it's like, well, you were against it and you say all these things. It's like, do as I say, not as I do. And I was going to make the analogy of like, well, but yeah, that's a cop out in some sense, but it's also like people who smoke cigarettes. It's like I remember when I was like 6 or 7 or 8 years old, I had an aunt who was smoking, and she was out by the car smoking, and she's like, never do this, and she's doing it, and it's like, well, okay, she's a pure hypocrite. It's like, well, it's a little bit more complex. I don't know I'm not going to say that you're addicted or anything like that, and there's a financial
very well
aspect,
could
sure.
be.
Well, sure, and the fact that you're open about it is I think good. And so I do think, yeah, I mean, you're like, so you're going to get that criticism, but it's also an aspect of, you can discourage things without necessarily stigmatizing it per se.
Sure.
Right? Like smoking is an example where it's like, okay, are we going to like mock people who smoke and shit like that? It's like, that doesn't seem like a good idea. And in fact, you just isolate them further, and you don't open up a line of empathy and communication to be like, hey, why don't you think about quitting smoking or something like that? But you can still discourage things. Like, and I would say like riding motorcycles is like, this is a weird analogy, but it's like, really, you shouldn't ride a motorcycle because it's super dangerous. You're like 50 times more likely to die in a car accident. However, if you're a thrill seeker and you know that it's like that's your thing and you get a lot of enjoyment out of it, then you should do it. But you definitely shouldn't be encouraging, especially bad drivers, to be on motorcycles or whatnot. It's just there are behaviors that you can discourage without explicitly stigmatizing. And
the analogy of a drug dealer is really apt because I view.
Well, that was what I was going to say. There's it's all well and good for you, Lav, but there's a
I
other
feel
side
like-
of the story.
Yeah, the whole other side of the story is the men's perspective, how it affects men. And of course, I think the perspective of a sex worker and someone like you is very valuable because it's so rare that people speak out against something that's actively benefiting them. So in that sense, it is kind of brave. Obviously that word is so tainted now, but it truly is, because it's like you're directly benefiting, but you're also
stunning.
Yeah. But I think the men's story is actually just there's actually more responsibility on men than women. It's like women are, let's say in this case, if you view pornography as a digital drug, which I've often made the case that it is, women are digital drug dealers, and some of them have really good drugs that have really good sexy bodies.
I have the best drugs.
And the men, and some of them young men,
Luna Lav Kush,
who don't have the life experience, who are still in their formative years, are consuming these drugs, and
Certainly.
they become addicted, and it affects their psyche, and it affects society on a massive scale through the men that it's continuously stimulating and continuously, I would say, damaging psychologically in the long term. And it's also damaging women too in different ways.
Sure. I think I've been very outspoken against porn, free porn, like I said. Like, I think that you should be 18. I think that every single porn site should make you put a card down so that they can check that you're of age. Whether or not it be like $1 or whatever the fuck amount of money it should be. I think the problem, because I'm coming from a feminist standpoint, but I land at the same idea where I'm like, men who are watching this porn are like brainwashed by like hardcore violent sex, committing these acts against women who may or may not like it, but ultimately is harming both of them because they don't understand intimacy, right? And the average porn viewer is 11. The first time they watch porn. 11.
I think that's what I was, probably 12 or 13 or
Yeah,
something like that.
I was 10 or 11. It's insane.
But see,
and
this-
then you build your sexual script on those fucking videos that you watched.
I disagree, though, that it's up to the state to legislate, because we were just talking about how you can't legislate away the culture of, gender confusion.
Sure.
But I think the same is true of this problem. I don't think any amount of showing your ID or whatever, there's always going to be a way around these. There's always going to be loopholes to accessing pornography because it's so prolific, it's so prevalent, it's everywhere. And there's no way we're going to make free porn illegal or hard to access. Once the cat's out of the bag, once Pandora's box is open, there's no going back. There's no law that's going to change that. So I think it's not up to the state to relegate how we deal with this. It's up to the culture, and it's up to a culture of men primarily to have responsibility to know that this is a drug, to treat it like a drug, and to be informed on this.
There's like 5 really good things that you guys said. First off, I agree, can't really legislate it. Although, again, I think being a former libertarian myself, that the only person dumber than a socialist is a libertarian. That's a joke for all the people who get offended. I do actually think regulation can play a bigger role than people realize, because like when I was in Chicago, when they made Juuls illegal, the flavored ones, and I stopped. I mean, I didn't get them as often. And so I think people underestimate the degree to which incentives can shape people's behavior and what's available and whatnot. But I do think ultimately, going back to the very first thing we were talking about, people, for men, I think like the struggle against porn, especially when you've exposed to it as a child, that's like a rite of it feels like it's a rite of passage that it's coming out of internet culture. It's like one of the positive aspects I see of like, I feel like there's a understood kind of underlying like idea that like, okay, when you're like in your mid-20s and stuff, like you really gotta cut the porn out. Like it like we know it's harmful. You go look at like Andrew Huberman or these very non-controversial figures who are saying like porn is probably not a good thing or whatnot. I think Lav, to one of your points, one of the counter arguments that someone would make is because you're talking about like violence in porn, which I do think is one aspect, and I certainly think from the female perspective, I would see why people are more sensitive to that. Obviously, I do think there is strong research to suggest that the introduction of porn into communities reduces the likelihood of sexual violence because it serves as an outlet. But to your point, that's one effect. But another effect is, well, it's still in a lot of young kids' mind that this is how you have sex or whatnot.
Like offending, so like we're talking about like offending like violent rapists. Sure, that is the case. But when we're talking about like a widespread scale, the average person is more likely to not ask before choking someone, or like not understanding, consent. Obviously, I'm never gonna fearmonger and say that porn is turning men into like sex crazed rapists, right? Like I'm just saying, no matter what. Yeah, but but there are definitely certain like you win some, you lose some with porn. Yeah.
Right, and I do think, Glink, to your point,
which is why I don't think that all porn should be illegal. Just pay for it.
Yeah, I actually, when you were saying that, like, you have to put a credit card in, like, well, that would require the kid to go get their parents' credit card, and then they would have to see it on their checking account. And it would just, because the libertarian argument is, well, the parents should be able to tell their kid no. But you have these giant corporations versus one parent, like, they're going to find a way around it. So you should put some structural incentives in the way. But I think, Glink, your perspective on it is men's responsibility. It's like, this is why, I do think it's like drug dealing. I think that's a fair analogy. But I don't necessarily blame the women performers. I do think there is something like, and Alive, I don't know if you do this, but like the intimate connection, the idea of like, hey, if you pay me, I'll laugh at your jokes and I'll send you personal notifications and I'll be your friend or whatever. It's like that's just as bad as that. Right. And I think that is the most insidious aspect of OnlyFans in particular, because porn, when it's Pornhub or the Playboy magazines in the 80s or whatever, it's like that there was enough distance for that where it was, I'd say it was categorically different. But this is now like, no, this is not just sex. This
personal.
Is
it's parasocial. It's parasocial,
yeah. And that is, I can't imagine how much that screws up.
It becomes another thing because we know that sex workers are safer when there's parasociality. So it's
They're
like
safer
another
when there's parasociality.
Yeah, so it's like a dance. So like you're a sex worker is less likely to like die. Like men with parasocial relationships. God, they did this like maybe I'll find it and post it later. But it's like men who go to porn conventions to meet their favorite porn star are on average like vote more left. Like thinks that like less misogynist, right?
But men surprise me.
No, of course. No, but men who don't have relationships with these women, who just like watch like whatever's on the page at Brazzers or whatever, are more likely to be misogynistic towards women, more likely to vote right, more likely to do all these things. So it becomes this sort of like interesting, and I guess it's more like it's not causality, right? It's more like correlation.
There's a lot of complicated factors.
But still, it's like I've felt way more safe with the people who interact with me rather than like people who leak my shit and put it on fucking Reddit, and like those people are like, oh, I love that, like, you know what I mean? It is different.
And that's why I think this was the point that Glink was bringing up to begin with, is like there's two different conversations to have. There's this, how does this affect the performer, which is almost all women, side of things, and then how does this affect the men, or almost all, which is all the consumers, right? And those are almost two not completely, but those are different conversations enough.
And we're keeping each other in this prison also, which I think is funny.
Right. Like, and your point about gatekeeping is like, well, that we can separate these two and say, hey, there's this conversation about the men going on that actually affects whether or not women should be doing this.
Yeah.
And vice versa, whatnot. So
totally. Because if the demand wasn't there, then
and I think the way to go
the drug
forward,
addict is ultimately responsible over the drug dealer. But go ahead.
I think the way to go forward with this is to have, well, like I made a documentary on OnlyFans like 2 years ago, where I interviewed both models and the consumers, the fans, and just talked with them, and I think that's the way forward, is like conversations between these two sides. Really just, honestly, I think the way forward is more conversations between men and women that are not so categorically like segregated. Like men talk about autistic games 24/7 and fucking politics, and women talk about like something, equally uninclusive. So it's like
the fact that you don't have an example at the ready just proves you hate men.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know, what do girls talk about their sexual experiences pretty often, right? I don't know. But,
you're like, you talk about your nails or your hair or something.
Oh, it's like the classic, like, well, that's like the 50s. It's like, well, men just care about sports and women just care about, cooking and cleaning and whatnot. It's like, there's an inherent
But I think
dichotomy.
I think in order
that's
to break
underneath all of
down,
this.
so I don't think gatekeeping. I'm actually against gatekeeping in principle because I think the way forward is to break down the barriers between people, not erect more barriers. Because if we do erect more, they're just going to get, again, like there's always a loophole. There's always a way around it. There's always, okay, if you're the woman who's brave and outspoken, there's always what was the name of the woman you mentioned that is like, you said was like dumb? I don't know what you said. Genevieve.
Yeah.
There's always the Genevieve, there's always the someone else. There's always, you put the credit card into the website. There's always going to be the Reddit leak of all the fucking free stuff right there. So sure. I think the way forward is to have more of these discussions. But the first problem is like, we need to acknowledge we need to just be honest. That's the first thing is like, I think there's a denial, both men and women. On the men's side, there's a denial that this is potentially negative. There's a denial that there's a compulsion to view these things, to jerk off to it. There's a denial that this affects your outlook on sexuality and of women, which I think all these things are true of every man that watches porn, but some of them are in denial and some of them are not. Like, I'll be the first to admit, my life has been altered. My mind has been altered somewhat by porn, watching that growing up.
Yeah.
And but it's only
unhealthy.
through acknowledging these things, through being somewhat vulnerable, through being brave enough to say it, is how you move past it. I think like the stigma is now in the other direction. Now the stigma is, if you talk about porn and you're honest about how it affects you and you're honest about how bad it is, it's like, that's almost a taboo. I guess we're breaking that taboo a little bit lately, like in the past couple years, but that's the way it was. And I think with women, I think if more sex workers took your route of being honest with how it affects them and how it makes them feel victimized or objectified or commodified, then we, I think somewhere between those two things is more of the conversations we need to have, because we can't have the culture being nobody gives a fuck about whether what'd you say? Like you said, when you came out and were saying all these things about sex work, nobody gave a fuck, right? How did you say that again?
Yeah, like nobody. I was fighting a war of people, of like invisible soldiers, like nobody, like soldiers who said that they were gonna be there and weren't. Like it was like, like just no one cared about what I had to say because they'd just rather come. Like nobody. Because
they'd rather come.
Nobody cares. Yeah, like nobody cares about what how sex work affects someone. Unless, I don't know if you guys heard Mr. Girl's take, but or if you know who Mr. Girl is, but Mr. Girl was saying that I was only coming forward about how much it harmed me because it would make people hornier to know that I didn't like that I was doing it. He's a fucking freak. But which like is true.
I was going to
bring
up
be
Mr.
true.
Girl, ironically.
That's gotta be true, right? Like that's gotta be true for some people. But I think ultimately that discouraged me from staying in it and also spreading the message. So that's also why I took a break. Because I was like, oh fuck, if I'm not being completely morally cohesive, then like fuck, maybe I do need to stop doing this. But it was a whole mess.
So why did you, I mean, you said a little bit because you don't want to be the mother who has the kid who stumbles upon your set and your kind of career that way. But is there...
Oh yeah, I don't want to be in this forever. It feels like I will be though, but I don't want to be.
I think it goes back to the do as I say, not as I do issue, which again we talked about is not as clear cut as it is, but it's like I think one criticism I could see being levied against you, Lav, is like you're open about this. You're not even you said you could be addicted or whatnot. Like this could be unhealthy or whatever.
When I say could be, I mean I am. I am addicted to it. I'm addicted to the validation it gives me. I'm addicted to of course.
So if that's the case, then why do you not explore that thought further? Like, okay, if you know that you're addicted and you know that addiction implying it's unhealthy, why do you not?
Because I think that sometimes self-awareness is enough. And I think that I don't need to be the perfect person. I don't need to be completely morally aligned with my actions. Nobody fucking is, right? There's
a Bo Burnham, I don't know if it's an interview or a specific bit about exactly that. Is like, just He's like, if I just have enough self-awareness, that'll what do you call
That'll
it?
negate my.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll just. Oh, but I'm doing something hypocritical, but I'm self-aware that I'm hypocritical.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
it's like
No,
suddenly fine.
and
Which
but I
I-
know
which-
that that's not the case. I know that that's not the case, and I'll bite the bullet and I'll just say like I said, I black-pilled. Nothing I do will change it. I'm not going to be the only person. Like, I'm not going to jump first.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah,
I'm making money. I'm making money. This is how I live. Like, this is how I do my shit. If everyone in the world stopped at the same time, absolutely. It's like makeup. I'm like against makeup or against plastic surgery, right? Like, but I'm not going to stop wearing fucking makeup because I like the way that people treat me, and everyone else is still going to be wearing makeup and I'm not going to be. That's putting me at a disadvantage. Why would I do
Can
that?
I just say real quick? This is the result of me watching too much Jordan Peterson, or perhaps not enough.
Yeah.
But Lav, you and I have literally like the most fundamentally different worldviews in terms of your perspective is you're not going to make any difference about it. My perspective is every single thing that
You still have hope.
Yes, yes, maybe. And I don't mean you personally, but every single thing that you as an individual just generally does has ripples and impacts that are infinitely more significant than you can possibly realize. And I do think, and this is just, I don't even know why I'm offering this opinion aside from, we're on a stream and that's what I'm supposed to do. But I do think there's an element of, I don't think being self-aware is enough. If you're self-aware that you're doing harm to yourself and potentially to others, although you're, I think, pretty good about minimizing it to others, that you can paddle that way for a while, but that's eventually going to come back and snap back, I think, because you can only go so long by saying,
here's the thing,
it's like the addict, it's like the alcoholic is like, I know I'm an alcoholic.
I know,
virtually
I know
all
all
of the
of
actual addicts. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I know all of this. I know all of this. I'm at the point. I'm living selfishly right now. I'm getting mine. I get what I'm doing right now is like not.
You got to integrate your shadow. You got to be willing to embrace your own dark side. Otherwise, how can you ever do good in the long run? So
Yeah,
it's complicated. I'm not telling anyone how to live their life.
This is an extremely complicated thing. It also I'm also trying to figure out what. Yeah, it's just. I think that I'm going to try and do sex work in the way that I think sex work should be done. And create a model, because I think that sex work is not going. I don't think sex work is going anywhere anytime soon. Anytime soon, maybe ever.
Sure, it's never
always
gone away.
been
It's
there.
always it's if anything,
Yeah.
it's the thing that's never gone away. Yeah.
So I'm trying to do things to reduce the harm. Obviously, I'm not going to be on OnlyFans. I'm not going to talk to the people that I whatever. I'm going to integrate sex work in between journal entries or in between essays of other political things, because I had a big problem with that, dehumanizing sex workers also. And it's hard to dehumanize me when you're trying to sift through porn of me just talking about politics and feminist theory. And I guess you don't have to look at that, but if you're going through 6 essays to get to it,
it'd be easier to dehumanize you. But no, I'm just kidding.
no, but I think that I can do harm reduction and still, I don't know. Like I said, I also like it.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the point of there is just a certain element of you're probably, from a personality perspective, you're probably very high in openness, which is the kind of creativity dimension. Some people are very low in openness and they don't get any value out of art, and they don't they don't listen to crazy music. It's some people are just wired to have a very open mentality, and posting nudes of yourself and having that turn you on. It's first off, that's not that unusual, I don't think, to begin with. But for publicly, for anyone to be able to see, yeah, that's further along the edge, but it's not so far removed. It's we got to draw a line somewhere, so why not?
Yeah.
But I think ultimately, Greg, as 2 straight white males, Lab, I think we'll just come up with a game plan for you, and if you could just follow it through and give us updates, and we'll get you out of this and save the day as usual.
Yeah, I'm not white either.
I'm Armenian.
That's white.
That's white. You're if Candace Owens is a white supremacist, you're white. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
also I'm
Well, that's
also
a whole
Jewish
nother-
and indigenous. So
That's a whole nother discussion,
Yeah.
but I think I think the whole race thing is also a very Western first world perspective.
which
Like
True.
Europeans don't view themselves as white; they view themselves as
no.
German or Italian or French.
Oh God,
or
yeah, that's a
something, you
whole
know.
separate thing. Can we talk about pronouns real quick? About when it's okay to refer to someone as their pronouns? Because if I recall, at the beginning of this conversation, I politely asked everyone to go around and give their pronouns, and I said mine as SWer, and Lav, being the transphobic, bigoted, sex addict person, decided to dismiss my identity and laugh at it, which I felt was fine. Glink, you made the point about you're okay calling someone who is, let's say, female, who's gone through transition, or done whatever. If they identify as something, you're okay with calling them that out of respect, right?
Yeah.
So this is a dichotomy I drew, and I'm pretty comfortable with this dichotomy currently. I switch between there's transgenders and there's transsexuals, right? There's true scum and too cute and all that stuff. There's the trans medicalist versus the whatever. The dichotomy I'm relatively comfortable at now is because the question is, let's say someone, that was the purpose of the video, was, hey, there are people that identify as adult babies, or there are people that identify as otherkin, or there's people that identify as Apache helicopters, which was the meme, and the whole reason that meme stuck around is because it exactly predicted the obvious logical outcome of we're going to accept all identities. And I've even seen people like Vosh be like, yeah, neo-pronouns like Zimzer and it's and stuff, like that's cool and whatnot. That's the logical conclusion of it all. My condition is, if the pronouns that you are asking me to use require me to affirm a delusion, not a delusion, that's too imprecise, a specific denial of reality, then I will not do it. So for example, and Lav, you're talking, you've got transsexual friends, the two transsexual people that I talk to, you can find any number of anyone online. It's like most transsexuals, and you made the point, is like they know that they're still a biological male or female, whether or not they transition or go through surgery. And I have no problem calling someone a he or a she or whatnot if they're aware, like, hey, I'm not literally a male or female. There are people, and I was going to show the clip of the trans cyclist who went on Trevor Noah. This is like hundreds of thousands of views and whatnot. This is like as mainstream as anything else, saying like I'm biologically female. Like I'm not just a woman, I'm biologically female. This was a male saying that. And I believe that's what the trans swimmer, Leah Thomas, right? Who the Olympics banned from participating in female sports, ironically. Mm-hmm. If someone, because the question is, why is it okay to affirm one quote unquote delusion, but not another one? Because to the average person, let's say the culturally conservative person who doesn't pay attention to any of this stuff, doesn't even know about trans people or like barely knows about it. It's like, well, a man that identifies as a woman, like that's a delusion. Like I'm not gonna call them a woman any more so than I'm gonna call a schizophrenic who thinks he's Jesus Christ Jesus. And I would argue if someone was genuinely mentally ill and thought they were like Jesus, you would be doing a genuine harm to that person by affirming that delusion.
Actually, I want to push back against that.
Okay, well, to wrap up the point, my criteria is if I feel like I'm participating in someone else's genuine delusion, then I'm not going to call them by the pronouns they want. But if they look, I know I'm not like a female, obviously, or I know I'm not a male, obviously, but I went through all this transition, I want to be seen socially, then yeah, I've got no problem. And it really bothers me, the TERF, which I identify, like I'm more likely to be a TERF than me criticizing one, but like the ultra feminist, second wave reactionary feminists are like, I will never use someone's preferred pronouns under any circumstance. I'm going to call Blair White a he. It's like you demanding that I call Blair White a he is just as absurd as Leah Thomas demanding that I call, or Elliot Page demanding I call he, they a she or whatever. It's like, so that's the issue is, am I being forced to participate in a denial of reality, and whether or not someone acknowledges it, I think, is the deciding factor. But you were saying, Glink, you were going to push back against.
Are you guys aware of the story of the Tower of Babel?
Are you aware of the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Well,
Yes.
the story of the Tower of Babel is when man came together to build a tower to reach heaven, and while they were doing this, they became confused through language, and this is where all the different languages come from. This is the origin story of human language. That is all these different languages. Okay. Well, what's happening right now is the modern day equivalent with technology. All of this stuff with gendered language, with pronouns, with how people identify is the result of information, of people being inundated with more information than they know what to do with, which comes as a result of a technified metaphorical Tower of Babel we're building. We're rivaling gods in our capabilities thanks to technology. We're reaching up to the heavens. And as we're doing that, things become increasingly abstract, complicated, and diverse to the point that we cannot make sense of it with our rudimentary human language of English or of whatever the language is. And English is especially bad because it just has certain limitations that other languages don't. So, do you guys agree with that? What do you guys think?
And I would add to that, as technology increases, the range of identities that become viable increase. So, for example, prior to birth control and prior to condoms, it actually was a terrible idea for people to go around and just have sex with everyone, right? Because, STDs, like AIDS, could actually wipe out an entire species. So the reason that religions and, societies had all these strict sexual taboos was in part like a very practical evolutionary phenomenon where if tomorrow all birth control and all condoms of all kind were gone,
they were gatekeepers.
And women no longer,
those acted as, we had a lot of gatekeepers throughout history to get to where we are now. But because all the gates have been torn down, we now have people in elephant suits next to paraplegic, transgender, mentally ill people at furry conventions. I think if nowhere along the way people stop and call out what's happening, we're doomed to just continue further down it. But Lav, maybe the reason I took interest in even talking with you is because I saw some semblance that while you probably don't have the big picture figured out, because nobody does, I don't have a complete map of meaning or of the truth or something, but it's like at some point you saw there was a problem that you needed to talk about with OnlyFans, that you had to put your neck on the line to some extent, put your reputation on the line or put your image on the line to speak out against. And I would say you're saying you're black-pilled and all that, and maybe that's true, but like there's something there as well that is hopeful, that is like not clinging, but searching for something more meaningful than just the endless commodification of human lives and souls. And I mean, this, if anything matters at all, it's the psychology of our culture and where it's heading. And it's like, if people don't speak out against things that are just nonsensical and that are exploitative and all these different problems that you saw in OnlyFans,
I think that there's a lot of criticism can be levied against me for going back, but I think my main mission is like to prevent me's. Like I've come this far and it was a fucking roller coaster, and I do not want anyone to go through the shit that I've gone through. And right now I'm like, okay, not a lot of hope for me. Maybe there is in the future, right? But if I can prevent and I've gotten so many messages from women who were saying that they were going to not go into OnlyFans, or they were thinking about it, decided not to because they saw my video, or, because they got out of it because they saw my video. Like that is what ultimately matters to me. And I think that who better to sell that or to tell someone that than someone who has had their life completely like obliterated because of it. Like, not obliterated, because obviously in some ways I am doing well, like money, right? But like soul wise, like I don't feel great, and I haven't, right? So like, I mean, we all got to do what we got to do. And that's sort of why I'm in like the black pill, like I'll just make my money and get the fuck out sort of thing. But like, I'm still like, I'm not stopping therapy and doing this, right? Like this is going to be an active discussion that I'm having with my therapist every fucking week. Like while I do this, while I make it work for myself, it's either this or like disability checks because of my heart condition. So it's like, I don't know what the fuck to do. So I'm trying to at least also make a positive out of it as well by like making it, semi-educational and whatever. But I don't know. That could be a big cope from my standpoint. But still, I don't ever want anyone to be in the position that I've been in, or to go through. Because like 2 months ago, I was so mentally unstable after 6 years of nonstop sex work that if I didn't have a good support system, I wouldn't be here. Probably not the best time to start up a streaming career. Yike. But I did it, and so I don't know. Hopefully, if anything comes from this, it's maybe not gatekeeping, but I just want people to know what the fuck this does. Fuck Mr. Girl if he thinks that me saying that is gonna make more people, but fuck him if he thinks that's an ad. Some parts of me really like sex work, obviously, but some parts are
with the
really
Mr.
hard.
Girl thing is like, I think people are limited by their perspectives, and so if he doesn't, I mean, I've talked with him a couple times, but like, let's just, if his only motivation in life is something that serves the self, then the only lens in which he could view others is doing the same. And I'm saying maybe there's I don't even know you, but I'm just saying it's very possible that the reason you spoke out against OnlyFans is not to be self-serving, which I think is what he's implying with that statement, but is something that you could consider selfless. And that would be in line with like Christianity or God or religion or something greater than the self is what I'm saying that's a sign of. So I think that's a good thing. And so I wouldn't write yourself off completely. I mean, especially if you're 24, like, I mean, you have your whole life ahead of you, but yeah, you probably already know that.
And I think
Yeah, and fucking you PF Paul, you're telling me to be the change I wish to see in the world. It's fucking hard to be the change you wish to see in the world.
Oh yeah.
It's fucking hard, and that doesn't. And I know the counter to that is like, I know it's hard, but you gotta be. And it's like, I don't know, not me. It can be someone else, but I'll be a whistleblower. Someone else can be the fucking change, but I will absolutely partake, and I will support whoever is the one who is like, I'm not doing this shit anymore. But right now, I'm like, fuck, I'm getting too much from this to stop.
Well, like you said, you recognize the tension of, it's bad for you, you're unhappy, but you're going to continue to do it anyway.
I also am happy.
Yeah. There's other aspects to it. Yes, it's people. The most helpful thing I learned, language-wise, to talk about in therapy is to always refer to yourself as part of me wants this, but part of me wants that, because the human mind is a amalgamation of competing motivations that are genuinely at odds with each other. And so if you say I want this versus I want that, that's actually less accurate than saying part of me wants this, but part of me wants that. And so you're juggling two different parts of you. And I think I don't want to be psychoanalyzing you, but
no, do it. I
know. Anytime I start a sentence with
I
was just gonna say,
I
knew as soon as I said I don't want to psychoanalyze you, well, you better fucking spit it out.
That I'd beg for it. Yeah,
right.
Interesting.
Carl Jung said that internal contradictions that people have in their worldview will cause them. This is a paraphrase, obviously. Will cause them pain, and they will think it's a result of fate rather than the fact that they are holding a contradictory worldview. Like, this is true for, like, the example that comes to mind is like Vosh. Like, Vosh holds views that are contradictory. On the one hand, he fights for all these progressive values, but then he turns around and says, like, J.K. Rowling, shut up and all that stuff. It's like those, and any big figure you can think of, those contradictions will play out in a negative way. And you're in a weird spot because you're acknowledging that you're in the midst of a contradiction, and you know that it's causing harm in some sense. Part of you, it recognizes that it's causing harm, and you're going to therapy for it. And then you say, I'm not the one to make the change or whatnot, and so I'm gonna spend this time to get my money or whatnot. And it's like all of that is. It goes back and forth between the line of like, well, you embracing this or whatever is the first, you embracing I'm just going to do it. It's not my responsibility to solve the world's problems. That's the first step in being able to be the kind of person who can actually solve not the world's problems, maybe, but bigger problems. And for me, I grew up in a household that was very chaotic. I was the middle child, and there was all kinds of fighting all the time, ever since I can remember. And so naturally, I became the mediator. I was the golden child. And so it was, there's a fight that's about to break out. It's up to me to stop it, blah, blah, blah. So why am I on YouTube making videos about political division? Oh, there's an external conflict, and it seems like it might affect me. It's my responsibility to be the mediator, to be the one to do that or whatnot. And my problem is, and I learned in therapy, is the desire to solve that problem was self-defeating. Well, I'm the one that's going to solve, the civil war, or the impending civil war or whatnot, which is just as absurd as being like, Well, Lav at 24, you're going to be the one that solves all of, the young women's, who go into OnlyFans, all of their mental health problems. Like, you're going to be the one to save it. It's like, no, there's hubris involved in that. And so the acknowledgement of, no, that I can't solve that problem, and so I'm going to focus on me. Like, I do think that is the right attitude. I'd be hypocritical if I said that's not the attitude that I think that I had and have to adopt still to some degree, because I still probably spend more time than I should trying to address other people's problems than my own.
It is in confronting the contradictions that you find meaning. That seems to be as true as anything. And so, one contradiction that you're just pointing out there is like, well, how can somebody solve the world's problems if they're just one person? But the way to do that, ironically, is by solving your own problems, is by going internally. And obviously, I'm not saying one person. Well, I think one person is capable of saving the world, actually. But I don't think between any of us that's reasonably, a reasonable outcome, a likely outcome. But it's
not out of the question, though.
To live up to your full potential. That's how it starts. Is not by. And this is the problem with all the political madness that I see, whether it's trans or gender affirming or all this stuff is like, my pronouns, call me by my pronouns. It's an external way to solve the problems of the world. It's like, I don't have to face anything myself. Your language has to be controlled. This message has to be affirming me. I have to seek validation from the external world in order to solve my problems. And when you do that, you end up creating a hell world, and you're no better at solving your problems. You're no better as a person. You're just as mentally disturbed. And the world around you turns into hell. But instead, if you take that, and I think this is why I've gravitated at all to both of you guys, is because in different ways, obviously, but I think in certain regards, you guys have both understood this or exhibited this through the kind of content that you're making, which is self-reflective for the greater good of humanity to some, in some respect. So good job, guys. Keep it up.
Yeah, when you're online, you have a persona. I mean, you kind of have to, right? Like it's unhealthy to come on and talk to you guys as if I'm talking to a therapist, right? Like that's not healthy. Well, you're right. Sorry. Let me be more precise.
I think therapy is a big scam, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Oh, that is a whole nother discussion.
Wait, what makes it unhealthy?
Oh, I don't think it's unhealthy.
Hold on.
I think it's just a scam.
I have to urinate before we get into this pissing.
Okay. Well, I don't know how much we're going to talk about that, but it's like with therapy, it's like the vast majority of therapists, first of all, you're paying them like $200 an hour to sit there and listen to your problems, which is what they do. I've not for myself, but anyways, I've been in many therapy sessions, and most of them will stare at the clock, listen to what you have to say, yes, and then ask you some basic questions. The best job a therapist can do is be a mirror for yourself. And some people might need that who lack the ability to have self-reflection, but I feel like if you have the ability to have some self-reflection, you don't actually need a therapist at all. And alternatively, things like this, like talking with people online, having a platform or a voice can be just as effective at being the tool for self-reflection as a therapist.
I agree with you. I think that also that mirror needs to not be like toxic, and usually misery loves company. So if you're someone who is toxic, going to like your toxic friends about what you should do, probably bad, right?
True.
So I think you're like paying basically for like a friend with expertise that's not going to hurt you, or isn't going to try to hurt you, like knowingly, right?
But you also could be wasting a lot of money and time because it's really hard to find a therapist that actually cares.
Certainly. I think that's true. I think that my therapist works the best though is because I don't have like parents to talk to about shit like this. So I think that like therapists are really great for like, people who are lonelier or who are less, more socially inept.
Yeah.
But maybe for the average person, having a couple friends that you could use as that mirror, probably more helpful, a lot cheaper.
Ideally. I mean, I think that's what we should be striving for.
Is your argument, Glink, that friends are you don't need to pay a therapist if you have a genuine relationship with a friend, something like that?
I think that's a very simplified form, but I think it's basically like the best a therapist can possibly hope to be is a mirror that helps you self-reflect. And
Yes, I agree.
and I really take issue with this, like, I call it like a very millennial thing to do, but it's like, oh, go to therapy. Like, that's like the default answer to once anyone encounters any semblance of mental illness or like any problem. It's like the immediate answer is we just need more therapy. If everybody was paying a therapist $200 an hour, we'd solve all the world's problems. Like, no.
That is, I don't think that's a valid criticism at all, because you could just as easily make the analogy. A lot of people's response to, I have all these physical health problems. Well, people just say, just exercise. Like, yeah, that's the reason they say that is because that's 100%
Wait, but no,
the
there's
best
a
thing you
difference
could possibly
there.
do.
Hold on. Sorry, there's a difference there though. Exercise is a self-imposed activity. A therapist is an external
Choosing to go to
person you're
therapy
paying.
is a self-imposed decision that
True.
a lot of people have struggled to make.
True.
The first step to going to therapy is a big hurdle. It certainly was for
But
me.
you don't. It's like a priesthood. Like, you don't need the priest for confessional to acknowledge your vulnerabilities. You don't need a mediary. Some people could use one. I'm not saying
think I
You
did.
give. I also think you give people a lot of credit. I think that you probably think that most people have the capacity to like transcend.
They
I
do.
don't know if that's necessarily no. So yeah, I picked up on that you thought that, but I think that most people do not actually. For whatever reason, I think that most people are actually very happy to like not be in touch with their sense of self at all. Like,
Yeah,
I think that makes them happiest.
I also think it's very, very difficult. You said a therapist is at best a mirror to hold up to, and you can self-reflect. I think it is very difficult, if not impossible, for a friend to fulfill that role, because a friend knows you in ways, and especially if it's a long-term friend, they have implicit biases about you that they don't even recognize. And when they offer advice, quote unquote, or even just even the questions they ask, if they're not offering advice, just listening or whatnot, they've known you for so long, and they have certain frames and perceptions about you that are built so deep in your mind or their mind that they're going to offer advice that it might sound great, but it's not the kind
I'll
that you
acknowledge
would need
that,
to
but
address.
I
certain kind
had
of
just
problem.
said this while you were peeing.
No,
really? Okay.
no, that's a good point. I mean, I think that's worth.
Well, hey,
Oh, it's a better point when a man says it. Interesting.
No, I think it's a point worth repeating.
Great minds think alike. That's all.
But here's the thing. You also, if you acknowledge that there's a benefit to being impartial, as the therapist would be, not knowing you. There's also a benefit to being partial. Like,
of course.
I think having somebody that genuinely cares for you is infinitely valuable. Like, you can't place a number dollar.
You're probably better if you
That.
could only have one, a good therapist or good friends. I think it's good friends every single time.
Yeah.
And that's where I think I came
Or
in. You said a lot
family.
of people
I mean,
don't have
family's
that.
good too.
Yeah. Anyone you can talk to and have.
But I acknowledge that there's a problem where, of course, the biases of like, and see, this is the funny thing about therapy. I think therapy fills the void that community once did, because
have you been to therapy out of curiosity?
I've been to so many different therapies. I mean, not for myself personally. I've been to therapy for family. So I've been in sessions where I
But
specifically
you've never
know
had a personal therapist yourself.
I mean, I've been to like one session that was for myself, but it was about anyways. But I've been to I've studied psychology as well. Like, I'm not just speaking completely out of my ass here.
Well, I watched Jordan Peterson for 2 years, so all of my mental health.
Yeah, me too.
problems were
So exactly. So no, but that's
my point. That's absurd. That is what I thought was the case. Not that literally, but like, I spend all my time. I know this. Like, I can diagnose other people's problems easy. Oh, I see something going wrong with this person. Again, I spent my whole life internalizing other people's problems, and so I was able to solve them in myself and then externalize that. So I'm great at solving other people's problems. But the thing you don't realize is, well, look, I'm so good at solving other people's problems. Obviously, I'm good at solving my own problems, and that is simply that for me was absolutely not the case. And there's just things that
people have blind spots. But I guess just as a big picture perspective, it's like 100 years ago, therapy didn't exist because people had close-knit
Priests.
families and communities that would care for them if they needed that. They had outlets for that. Like you go to some third world country, they don't go to therapists when they're depressed. They don't even know what that is. It's like, no, it goes back to like the first world thing. So I'm not saying in this case though, I don't think therapy is complete nonsense. I think people should be a little bit wary of how widely they prescribe it. And also every time people prescribe it, it should come with the acknowledgement that most therapists don't give a fuck. They're in it for the money, and it costs a lot of money. So
let me tell you something funny. Aside from, first I'll say, I'm sorry to say this, but Mr. Girl is right on this one. It's anytime he finishes a, an advice thing or whatever, it's like, also go to therapy. It's like, fair enough. You said most therapists are, well, obviously they're human, so they themselves have flaws that they inevitably will project into the session, which is dangerous for sure. I had a therapist who, I started therapy in June of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, because I was like fighting with friends. I was isolated. I lived on my own, and I was like completely isolated, and it was just miserable, and it was bad. So I went into therapy, and in the very first session, I like broke down crying, in part because of the current situation I was in, but also because of stuff that I had held on to for a very long time. And I went to one intake session with one random guy that I found on whatever it is, psychology.com or whatever the thing is to find therapists. And funnily enough, I typed in Jungian to see if Jungian training, because I felt like, it'd be cool to be able to talk about like Jordan Peterson type stuff. This guy was not even he was licensed. He was like a student in training, right? There was an actual PhD, whatever, and he was the licensed professional. He was allowed to do it or whatnot, but he wasn't a full-on therapist. I believe, and I didn't know this until I was like 5-6 sessions in. I looked on his website, and apparently that practice issued gender, affirming surgery notes for children. They said we do youth surgeries or whatnot. Like we will write the approval letters for youth to get surgeries. And naturally that presented a problem, right? In fact, like when I think of someone who is so far removed from reality, I think of someone who's like, imagine the person who is signing off on a 6-year-old to get gender surgery, right? So I was like, well, how am I going to trust anything this guy says? And
do you think, how often does that happen?
I don't know.
Not very.
I mean, well, there's all kinds of things that don't happen that often that still are worthy of our attention.
Sure, but I think that to frame it like... I think that the way that you framed it was a little fear-mongery. That's like,
okay.
6-year-old.
Well, thank you. As I'm sharing my personal story, we all get off. No, I'm just kidding. That fair enough. Whatever. I'm just.
Sure.
I'm saying a lot of feeling right now, less so than thinking. So perhaps that's why. And there's
it's
more.
It's a vulnerable moment. So.
Yeah.
But my point is, this guy in a lot of ways was like the exact opposite of what I needed. And after like 9 months, I stopped going. And I, to this day, will say it was the best decision I ever made, because it was so the bare minimum of the stuff he offered in terms of, Paul, this was the most central lesson I learned in therapy that I tell everyone. Is like, there is a difference between a thought and a feeling. If someone's being an asshole to me, and they say, or someone says, hey, how do you feel about this person being an asshole to you? I would say, well, I think, they were having a bad day, and, I acted in a way that wasn't, as good to them, and, I probably could have avoided the fight. It's like, no. I ask you, how do you feel that they're being an asshole to you? Not what do you think about why they're being an asshole? How do you feel? Like, it fucking sucks. Like, my friend's being an asshole to me. Like, we're going over to play board games, and he's fucking accusing me of cheating, and it's like, what kind of fucking friend do you think I'm going to accuse me of cheating or whatnot? It's like, that's a feeling. Right? And I literally did not know that there was a difference between a thought and a feeling. And I walked home from that therapy session laughing out loud for 10 minutes, just like, oh my God. Oh my, like, because my therapist demonstrated, like, hey, Paul, I'm going to show you what it means to do a feeling. Fuck this guy. Fuck, blah, 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 whatever. Just like letting it all out. And it's like, having been someone who intellectualized my way out of problems, I couldn't see that until it was reflected up to my face. Paul, this is what I'm asking. Here's what a feeling is. Right? And it's like, no friend would have ever... Friends had given me that advice, but I just took it as, well, they're wrong for something.
If I was your friend, you wouldn't have needed a therapist.
There's a part of me that that believes that laugh.
Yeah, I would say that you're.
I've been with my fiance. He doesn't need. I've been his mother therapist. I've changed his fucking life. A good woman will do that. That's all I'm gonna say.
Careful of the codependency at a certain point, because
I think that's it. You want to talk about divine masculine, divine feminine? I think that a great melting.
Divine masculine. I didn't mention.
Glink was talking about that. Glink was talking about masculine femininity earlier, and I call it divine masculine, divine femininity, because I think that I think that a lot of men don't self-actualize the way that you men have, right? I don't think that it's as common as it is in this conversation, right?
Sure. Yeah, I don't think most
I think
men
that a lot of
talk
women,
about.
A lot of women do, and I think that we're taught to do this, whereas like men aren't really taught to do this. So that's why I think that like another beautiful yin and yang is like I think that a lot of women do this for their partners, and a lot of men do like end up taking care of their partners in like monetary senses, but a lot of women do end up doing this to their partner in a way that like a therapist would. So
I think that's a good point. I think ultimately the whole point about masculine and feminine is that men and women need each other to balance each other.
Complementary.
There's this. I was listening the other day to this interpretation of the Adam and Eve story by this guy named Matthew Peugeot. He's Jonathan Peugeot's brother, Paul, if you know him. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about how Adam's job was to name all the animals. Like he was the original scientist. Like Adam deals in the abstract, which is what men do really well. They like you're saying, thinking is an abstraction. Feeling is an experience. And so Eve came out of the necessity to keep Adam from spiraling into madness, basically, because in only dealing with abstractions, you're detached from reality. And Eve and this, I think, emotional intelligence that comes with like the feminine traits are so important for men to integrate. You're talking about integrating the shadow. I think that's part of the shadow for men to integrate. And maybe for women, I'm not sure exactly what the other. I think women need some structure and order, and that's why.
I need someone to take
Andrew Tate over here.
I need someone to take Patreon away from me.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No, that's Glink, that's the whole. There's a masculine aspect in women that as you mature as a woman, so to speak, you integrate that aspect, and then as a male, you integrate the feminine aspect. Well, and I just personally this kind of conversation is far more likely to happen. Just my observation with like when I'm with like females and I have like talking to my female friends, it's much easier to get into this immediately versus and those of my male friends that it's easier to get into this level of conversation tend to be more feminine, kind of liberal, like beanie wearing, hipsters and whatnot. And it's like okay, that's a very stereotypical, anecdotal, but also representative kind of just example of what you're talking about.
I was just gonna say what you just said about the Patreon thing. In a societal sense, that's the result of the inversion of the masculine and feminine, because also the masculine were the providers, they're the breadwinners. But now that women have the option to just express themselves freely, openly, without any stigma or shame sexually and make a lot of money off of it, now it creates this weird, I think you're caught up in this weird issue of modernity where it's like on one side internally you recognize that this is not healthy, but on the other side practically, financially, and I'm not damning you for it, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. You want to and you feel the other personal satisfaction from it too, but you know what I mean, like there's been that changing of the roles where now it's like you can just make money, you don't need a man to make money off of Patreon.
That's a big part of it, more than even because I am caught in this, like I really do value like traditional masculine feminine roles, and I also I am sort of stuck in this modernity thing. I'll overshare for a second. But so my fiance makes a lot of money, and he's paid my rent, all of our rent for like the past like 2 years. And so at some point I was like, okay, I don't really need to do OnlyFans anymore, because we were like, amongst me feeling like shit about it, I was also like, okay, I can't afford to not do it anymore. So that's tight. And then we decided to, so then I quit, and then we decided to open our relationship, right? And so part of me is like, okay, I'm sleeping with other people, and he's paying me, and then I'm like, fuck. Like, I can't do that to him. And I also, like, there's guilt there, and there's also like, okay, if we're having this modern relationship, then I also need to like modernly contribute money-wise, right? So it becomes like, then it became like a bigger issue, right? So it's like, there's a lot going on, obviously. And he doesn't care otherwise, right? He's a fucking dude. He's like, and he's obviously like, he gets to fuck whoever he wants to. But it's like, it's still, for some reason, I still feel that like guilt that I should be like, if I'm going to participate in this like modern relationship, that I should have this like modern money making, like I should be contributing in that way. Even though I still cook for him, I still clean, I still do all these things. I'm still like, I don't know, the money thing is weird. Money's weird. I don't want to work. I don't want to have to work. I just want to live in a field. I want to pick berries. I want to be pregnant for 10 years straight.
The divine feminine.
This is the divine feminine. I don't know. Maybe I need to get offline. Maybe my fiance needs to take the internet away from me. And I just need to be his therapist and give us a couple babies. Who knows?
What happens when you have, this is not you specifically, but to the point of like, well, I agree in a romantic relationship, it should be therapeutic, like, in function, not like it's a therapeutic relationship. But it should be, therapeutic in the same way that like working out can be therapeutic. But what happens when inevitably, you're in a relationship and and the issues you have are with that person? Does it not? It's going back to Glink, becauseGlink's anti-therapy, or not fully anti-therapy, but therapy skeptical, therapy hesitant.
Okay, let me add to the therapy.
Well,
skepticism.
I also don't think that you should be in a relationship if you're not self-aware about your own shortcomings. So like if we have problems, if part of his, well, you have to be careful, right? Because
if they're real shortcomings, you can never be self-aware of them. That's what makes them shortcomings.
No, I don't think that's true.
You can be aware of. You can be. If I know that was a little poetic. You can be aware of like your flaws. Like I over-intellectualize and I make other.
The problem is that I am in the position where I can be extremely manipulative. The problem is that I can downplay.
We all do that to some degree.
Yeah, the problem is that I can downplay what our problems are. Like when he comes to me and he's like, blah, 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 I feel this way, whatever. I can be like, I can say no. I know it's true, right? So we might as well, that just becomes a communication issue though. Like, do you want to be with a partner who doesn't do that? But also, yeah, that's why you have other friends to spitball off of also. Like your one partner, it shouldn't be like a codependency thing where like your partner's the only person you go to, right? Like different things. That's also why I'm pro open relationship. I don't think that one person fills all those boxes, although I do believe in like a primary partner to do life with.
Do you think that open relationships are similar to only or sex work, where you are kind of gatekeeping, where like you should only, like most people, an open relationship will not work, just like sex work?
No, I actually think that I think that everyone should have an open relationship, honestly. I really do. I don't think that everyone can, but I think worst case scenario, you just like break up, I guess, right? Like there's not like a lot of harm in like
kids though, and like wanting a shared responsibility of raising children. Wouldn't it be more advantageous to have a strictly monogamous relationship in that sense?
So I think that there are ways that you can do an open relationship that are like toxic. I think that if you're someone who's looking for sex outside of your partner, like for whatever reason, you need to look at like why that is. Me and my fiance are mostly just like, if someone comes into your life and you're curious and you want to explore that, go ahead. Not like neither of us are on dating apps. Neither of us are like looking for someone. We're just like, if it happens, it happens, right? So I think that that's the best way to go into an open relationship. I think if you're someone who's like actively searching, something like that is going to get in the way of like having kids, obviously, right? So like when me and my fiance have kids, it's going to be like, our focus is obviously going to be on the kids. We're not going to be worried about shit like that. Even if it does pop up, like if I meet someone taking my kid to like Gymboree or something, I'll be like, this is interesting. I'll talk to my fiance about it, and then we'll decide what we want to do or like what I'm gonna do ultimately. But like, also there's still, there's also, I'm never gonna be like, I'm gonna go hang out with my boyfriend, watch the kids for 5 days, deal with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a dance. It's a dance.
Believe you believe that.
You believe that I believe that?
I believe that you believe that. I think.
I also don't want to be open forever. I think I also think that it's good to have I think it's time to have time constraints. So like I think right now we're gonna do like for the next year, and then when we have kids, we're gonna close it up until they're 5, and then we're gonna start. Maybe we're gonna reassess and be like, let's do another year of open, close back up for 10. Let's become swingers, close back up for 10. You know what I mean? It's gonna be like it's a dance. It's a dance.
Yeah, it's negotiated. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I know nothing about your relationship. I don't even want to speculate, or I can psychoanalyze you. But there's.
Why don't you bring your fiance
I would need 2 of you.
Be honest. Say
Hold
what
on.
you're thinking, coward.
I'll say how I'm feeling too.
Yeah.
What was I gonna say? Like I said, I do think there are a certain number of people who are out on the openness edge, who need to I draw a categorical distinction between open relationships, as in the 2 people can go, have sex with, people outside at kind of whatever time, as long as there's communication, I guess, sure. Versus like swingers who are like, hey, it's still us. We're just gonna bring like a third person in the bedroom or something like that. Like that, to me, that's just a sexual kink.
Hey, we
that's
noticed
not even
you
a
from
fundamental.
across the bar.
Yeah,
Your vibe.
drinking
Your
some
vibe.
pineapple juice. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just like, to me, that's just a kind of sexual kink. That's like, okay, we're just adding another person in the bedroom, but it's still a monogamous relationship. The open thing,
We're allowed to fall in love with other people. Like it's very much like it's like open in the way where it's like just do what you want, but we're choosing each other to do life with.
hey man,
Kind of like that. That's a good
peace and
that's an
love.
interesting approach.
Think about how beautiful that is. Like think about how beautiful it is to choose someone to do life with, to raise kids with, because you think that you're giving your offspring their best chance, right? Because you think that you complete each other in the way that you would be incredible parents. You'll be incredible partners throughout your life. You're so compatible that way. And then also being like, yeah, and you are still your own person though. You still have the capacity to love other people. And I really worried when we opened, like the first sexual experience I'd have with another person would like somehow take away from my relationship with my fiance, and was so shocked when it didn't. Like was so shocked when my new relationship did not change my primary relationship even a little bit. It was really strange. Even though I was developing these feelings for a new person, it's like, once you start loving your girlfriend, you don't stop loving your mom, right? So I don't know. I'm a very open to the
there are probably people, and I think you're one of them, who can handle something like that. But
I think most people can. I think that you need to.
Do
you think you couldn't? Why couldn't you?
I never having been in an open relationship, and not really any real functional long-term romantic relationship, but that's
nice.
A separate story. I just like, and I like, this is something I'm not like gonna, what would you say, moralize as much as I would about, stopping surgery on children, because that's something you can actually, this is like an experiential thing that I'm willing to say, like, look, I haven't been around long enough to honestly make judgments about what the ideal average relationship can be, which is like those are 2 conflicting ideas. But like jealousy, that's like an inherent human emotion. And
you integrate. We talk about jealousy all the time, but you also think about it. You feel jealous when one of your friends invites your other friend to do something and doesn't invite you. Jealousy is so normal. It's not only and jealousy also comes from a feeling of ownership. And that is a thinking error. You don't own another person.
I'm just going to make a comment that I'll accept that everyone is capable to some extent of participating in this new kind of open relationship. But also I'm also advocating that everyone is capable of being self-reflective enough to not need a therapist.
Sure.
Yeah, so your opinion doesn't count. So no. Look, I made a mistake of criticizing polygamy or polyamory previously, and someone I talked to was like, you know what, you've raised some good points. So I don't want to be as like, even though I might feel like, oh, I definitely couldn't do that. I don't think. I think most people I know couldn't do that.
Paul, let me ask
But
you
I'm
something.
willing to say I've got limitations.
That's because your third eye isn't opened.
Paul, I want to ask you something. Because something I've been thinking about. Maybe I should ask
Want to go on an
you.
e-date, Greg? Can we open up this relationship?
I don't know how well versed you are in the Bible, but in the
I've heard of it.
in the Old Testament, a lot of these, like Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac, and all these these people in the lineage of Jesus, they had, I don't know if you'd call it polygamy, but they had multiple wives and multiple sets of children with multiple different wives, and they formed this sort of tribe. And so in that sense, I support I don't think polygamy is the word. I support this, whatever this is about, not being strictly monogamous insofar as it benefits a shared larger family tribe type scenario. What do you?
Yeah,
do you
I
see the role
definitely
of
think
that?
men should be allowed to sleep with as many women they want, but women should only be allowed to sleep.
Yeah,
with
of course you think that. Yeah.
Listen,
That makes
Andrew
sense.
Tate was wrongfully banned.
Okay,
for
we found the
Tate.
compromise. Then all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I don't know. I just
It's a lot to think about.
I mean, I could make the intellectual case of humans are wired to be. We know that humans are to some degree wired to be monogamous.
Oh.
Because
You can't make that case. We actually have the
But-
opposite information on that.
hold on.
This
Okay,
is like
well,
the John
before-
Stewart. This is back to the
Hold
John
on.
Stewart statistic.
Yeah. All right, hold
No,
on.
we actually know that humans are not like ontologically monogamous.
Well, I don't even there. Like I said, there variation, and there are some humans on the margins, and maybe it's 10%, 20%, something like that. We don't know the numbers. Going back to our original dispute, but we know that there's. Hold on. What's your wait? I'm curious to hear what is your evidence or whatever that we know that they're not ontologically monogamous on average. Let's talk about on average, not because we both agree there's exceptions.
Right to marriage's end. What is the
You
what is
cut
the
out. Can you
number?
say that again?
What is the number one reason for divorce? This is just
It's
one.
cheating?
This is
It's
just one place I
financial?
can go with here.
Financial
It's not.
issues.
It's not.
Is it? Oh, is it? Is it man
Sexual-
loses his job?
No, it's affairs. It's
Yeah.
cheating.
Well, that's a
50
chicken. That's a chicken and the egg scenario.
Why no,
would the
it's not. No, we know that, that if it was so easy for humans, if we were supposed to do something, it would be easy. The way that we're supposed to breathe, right? It's easy to breathe. The way that we're supposed to eat, it's easy to eat. You
We're
can't.
supposed to do so. Well,
If
we're
it was
supposed to-
easy,
we're
if we were
supposed
meant to be monogamous, it would be easy to be
We're
monogamous.
supposed to live-
We wouldn't be attracted to other people when we were
That's
still
a very.
with a
I think
partner.
that's a very reductive way of looking at things. We're supposed to live meaningful lives. I'd say it's very difficult to live a meaningful life.
We're not supposed to live meaningful lives.
Well,
Who the
fair
fuck?
enough. Fair enough. That's a whole separate.
Yeah, that's a religion. That's divinity.
Well,
that's something,
no, I would
That's
argue.
your outlook.
But you
No,
said
I would-
divine
hold on.
masculine, divine feminine, so you believe in
Yeah,
some
really
aspect
coming at
of
me with a
divinity.
religion. Hold on. I would argue that meaning is a physiological instinct, just like hunger. It's not a religious phenomenon. Like, oh, life is. I don't think life has
Well,
inherent
so is
meaning.
sexual,
but
but
we,
so
we
is
are meaning
sexuality. So is sexuality.
You
Sure.
want
Okay.
to
Well, hold
have
on.
sex.
Let me just make the Robert
Now pair
Sapolsky
bonding.
human.
Now pair bonding. We actually do have data on that.
Okay,
Pair
so-
bonding is actually good for you, but also having. Okay, this is another wild card. I don't believe in casual sex.
I'm in that boat. I think.
Yeah, I do not believe in casual sex. I think that
I'm a little
if you're going to
hypocritical
do an open relationship, it should be with someone that your paramours, your lovers should be with people.
Hold on. What's the difference between pair bonding and monogamy then?
What do you mean?
Pair bonding. Maybe I'm using the words interchangeably when I'm.
When you're in an open relationship, you're still pair bonded to your primary partner.
Right, which was my point about, like, as long as it's still like, hey, it's still you and I, it's not like a love triangle where, like, Glink, you were saying, like, polygamy, well, I've got 5 different wives and I love them all equally. Like, I don't know if that's the case. There's still some you're still monogamous in a way that like it's you and your fiance. Like your fiance is the one person above all, right? Ultimately, so that to me that's monogamous. Now you obviously are, you're on the margin or whatever. But I guess my primary issue.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
It's monogamish.
Monogamish,
called,
sure.
Yeah.
But I would take issue with the idea that like, oh, I can love like 2 or 3 different people equally. Like, no, I don't. I don't think that I don't believe that
But
works.
can you
and to be fair, I haven't
I don't
articulated
think
out.
that works either. I think that you can love someone, but not in the same way.
Sure. Well, yeah, you can love your best friend and still love your romantic partner, love your parents and all that.
Yeah.
Okay, but hold on. Go back to the monogamy thing. 90% of all societies, or excuse me.
I love that you just pull these numbers out of thin air. It's really attractive. I like it a lot. You're like 98%, like you're just having
90,
you're just talking to talk.
I'm pulling a Jon Stewart here. 90% of all stop laughing at me. 90% of all human beings in all societies end up in monogamous long-term relationships, no matter what society they are in.
Yeah, but that's also because of societal norms.
No, because it's independent of culture.
No, how can you do a study
for
that's
the
independent of culture?
Don't take it from me.
How do you do a study independent of culture?
Don't
What's the
take
control
it.
group?
Don't take it. This is my video on some thoughts on OnlyFans, polyamory, but this is the clip from Robert Sapolsky, who is far wiser than either of us. Okay. Like tribal society. Listen, we were meant to be in monogamous relationships. It would be easy, and yet 90% of all human beings, regardless of their culture,
regardless of
maybe we're meant to be.
Just because this guy with a fucking beard is saying regardless of culture.
It's Robert Sapolsky. Please.
What's the control group?
He also has a man bun, not just a beard.
This is not just any man with a beard.
I'm begging you to tell me what the control group is. Like, how do we know like what would happen And let me say this one thing, right? Because he also said that we were polyamorous or polygamous before, in history, right? What happened in recent history that would probably change that? It starts with an R.
Marijuana. That's what happened.
It starts with an R. Religion. It starts with Catholicism. That's absolutely what it fucking starts with, because you start to look at monogamy when you think about the rise of the Catholic Church. You absolutely do. Oh no, I can't hear you anymore.
You see? Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Did you hear what I asked?
No.
I said, have you heard of a man named Jordan B. Peterson by any chance?
Yeah, I have.
You seem like a very intelligent,
very
good person who is going to make a huge difference in the world, and which means you obviously appreciate Jordan Peterson. You would appreciate the what would you say, the dismissal of the silly ideas that you put forward that religion is, it came around recently and it's the cause of problems and whatnot. It's a very intuitively reasonable point of view, but I don't think
religion is inherently the cause of problems, but I do think that like corruption in the church, especially like when mixed with policy, like with the kings and queens and whatever the fuck, obviously, like I think that
Cersei and the High Sparrow.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. No, I think that there's a lot of corruption. I think that having a personal relationship with God is very different than saying like you can't be gay or you can't have more than one wife, but that to some extent molded our culture and Western culture specifically for a very long time, because even in places like Africa, it's actually very normal to have a wife and a girlfriend. It's actually, that is societally...
That conflicts with Robert's... Hold on. Okay, sorry, I'm interrupting.
Everything he says is... Everything he says is 100% true.
Intellectually boxing it up. Well, hold on. I admit I haven't seen the study myself. I also have never seen a study that says the Earth is round. And yet I just foolishly perhaps take it for granted, right? There's some degree of outsourcing that I have to do, and Robert Sapolsky is a credible figure, let's say, in the realm of biology, human behavioral biology. Mm-hmm. We can go all over the place on the religion thing. First off, I agree, institutional religion can be corrupt, and like anyone who lives in the modern world with the Catholic Church and all that knows that. But the problem is, all human beings are religious no matter what. There's no way to escape that.
But that's what I didn't bring that up. I brought it up because the set of rules that was so rigid.
The rules emerged prior to culture.
Yeah, I know. So I'm saying that the culture of monogamy that we have now is in some part because of fear of God or because of a man-made fear. Yes.
No.
Yes.
No. That's the opposite. Hold on. The religious traditions of marriage are built on the biological nature of pair bonding. Pair bonding exists in birds and all that
No.
shit, right?
Wait, hold on. How would we have known that? People didn't. How would we have known that when when people who were writing the Bible were making rules? They didn't even know that you should wash your hands before tending to a fucking wound. They had no idea the psychology or the necessity of pair bonding.
I'm not saying they didn't have to know what they were doing for. They didn't have to know that their decisions were being influenced by evolutionary forces and forces that they had no knowledge of. But that is nonetheless what happened. Just like before we knew about evolution, doesn't change the fact that we were shaped by evolution. I mean, I don't know. Do you think evolution's a real thing, or am I?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, wait. So on that note, since you brought up evolution, though, that goes back to the tribal nature of
evolution
humans.
of dance. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
The tribal nature of humans, and so it would be evolutionarily advantageous to have an orgiastic culture around sex.
Yeah.
Because if there's a tribe of people having orgies and they produce offspring, then you cannot trace the father to one specific person as easily, or the parents to one specific.
Yep.
So because of that, there's a shared.
There's a problem with that.
What is the problem with that?
The problem with that is those children who are who need extra attention, what we would call like special needs or disabled or something like that. In societies that do that, what you described, they all die because no one takes responsibility for those children. You say, well, we've got 50 children and we're all equally related to all of them. So the one or two that are on the edges, well, they die. They don't get any help. And you see that in all of those tribes because it usually takes a stable monogamous relationship to devote specific attention to a child that has like disabilities or something like that.
Okay, but you can't. Okay, but hold on. But what you're doing there is pointing out
a moral problem.
A casualty of this practice and saying why it's not applicable, but tracing. In other words, like I could just as easily say what I think Lav's point kind of seems to be, which is like the problem with monogamy is what we're experiencing right now, which is these fractured families and divorce rates. I'm not saying those things are causally related, but if you're saying that the lack of care for special needs children is causally related to the
relationships,
to tribal, let's say tribal tendencies towards orgiastic sexual proclivities, then you know what I'm saying? It's like I think I think
there's
they're just
separate. You're making a separate point that we evolved that way, and whether or not it was good that those children would have been on the margins. It's like, well, evolution still would have selected for that method anyway, because evolution doesn't make moral injunctions. That's one element to it.
But also, even with the Bible, like I'm not making this up. Like Abraham had like 4 wives. I mean,
yeah, you're not making it up. The Bible is made up. That's the problem. Again, I'm.
But I genuinely am on your side.
Say it when I really am a conscientious objector, but I just got caught up in the fanfare of the papal armies marching through Rome, and now I'm on my way to Jerusalem. The original thing I was going to say is we know that human beings have certain neurological structures that are associated and we can be pretty confidently say causal to pair bonding behavior. So there are animals that are not pair bonding, right? And they lack it's like a vasopressin gene attached to the serotonin receptors, so that when people are like bonding and oxytocin gets released and all that shit, they associate the two, and that's what creates a pair bond. There's neurological mechanisms that we can see correlate with monogamy and whatnot.
Did you get
we
Chipotle?
Can actually what an anti-intellectual interrupt. No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry.
No. And my point is that you should just stop thinking for yourself and just listen to what Robert Sapolsky says, because he's got a big hippie beard and he seems smarter than I am. So
I like Terrence McKenna. He's also got a big hippie beard.
I need to watch more Terrence McKenna. People keep recommending me him.
He's great. See, but he's very pro. I'm not necessarily saying I'm anti-monog. I'm still figuring this out, but
yeah, I don't even.
That's I pulled
what I
that
believe.
from McKenna, because McKenna talks all the time about how we evolved and that why it's advantageous to be non-monogamous, strictly speaking. But anyway,
Sure.
Hey guys, I gotta go,
I was just gonna ask, what's the wrap-up time?
but this has been great. I really enjoyed this. This has been really. I'm glad we all agree that everyone else is crazy but us.
Like introspective, very smart people, I think, on Earth.
Yeah, we solved it.
I gotta say, guys, Glenn, thank you for inviting me on this conversation, Lav. I appreciate you doing what you do, and the honesty and the forthrightness with which you acknowledge the contradictions within you, and yet also acknowledge that there's a part of you that holds the contradiction, and there's a part of you that recognizes that in order to grow, you need to hold that contradiction, even though the contradiction might be bad in the long run. It's something that I resonate with in a very roundabout way. But I appreciate this
Brave.
discussion, guys. I think, yes, you're very brave and stunning.
Stunning and brave.
And I believe the universe has brought us three together in more ways than one. And now
This was so fun. We should have another conversation, I think.
Yeah, we can have
do it.
We can have Mr. Girl on and debate porn again.
Holy shit, let's do it.
yeah.
Let's
Probably a
fucking do
horrible
it.
idea, but maybe.
Mr. Girl, let me choose my words carefully here. One sec. I said Mr. Girl was leading a revolution on the internet because I thought he was like authentic beyond all belief. And I still believe he embraces that, but it's one of those things where, and I think Not So Erudite made this point, I believe, I could be misattributing, but she said like the embrace of authenticity can be so, you can do it so much that it becomes self-defeating, where it's like, oh, I'm just going to say what I'm thinking, I'm just going to say what I believe, where it doesn't work. And
Yeah.
that's one thing. And he also, I think, has a very biased and misinformed perspective on a man named Jordan B. Peterson, who I happen to be a fan of. But another time, perhaps, when we all have Chipotle.
Well, guys, yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for coming on. Great conversation, and
Yes.
yeah, hopefully we'll
Thank
do
you
some more
much.
sometime.
Yes.
Yep. Look forward to it again, guys.
Yeah.
Peace out,
Bye, guys.
Can't do. I can do real life conversations for hours. I just like when it comes to like staring at a Discord camera, it's like, get me the fuck out of here, you know. But that was great. I really enjoyed both Paul's perspective and Lav's perspective. I mean, I think she's kind of starting on this path of pursuing a meaningful life, which is good, you know. I mean, I think in the purest sense, that seems like what she's doing, and probably stumbling along the way, but I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm actually making a video that's going to be really short and sweet and to the point, but it's going to be a video of me basically saying all that. It's going to be on my main channel. It's going to be like it's going to be called something like Finding My Purpose. And I'll have that out soon. I've already filmed all of it. I just need to edit it. But yeah, how are you guys doing? Why is Peterson so popular? He seems boring. I think it depends on what state you're in for your life and what you're hearing from him. I mean, I think if you're listening to like some surface level political analysis or clip or something that he's in, it's pretty boring. But I think if you're someone who's in a difficult situation, as I certainly have been when I first heard Peterson back in like 2017, then it's really helpful to hear the perspective of someone who's embodying the role of a father figure. That's basically what he is. He's like the good father that, you know, and not saying he's perfect, by the way, but I'm just saying, like, I think what a good father should be is basically what he is, which, and again, like, fathers are not God, but I think they're actually symbolically kind of like God. So it's like an earthly father, right? And a heavenly father would be God. But like, I think fathers are a guide of life, and fuck, man, life is hard. It's good to have a guide. So that's my case for fathers. Is Tate the bad father? Yeah, dude, Tate, I mean, I don't even watch him. I've seen like one clip where he was just beating some woman, and I don't know. I really don't. I don't have a super strong opinion on him, but to me, he does seem like the evil Peterson. Like he seems like just a bad role model. Like like someone who seems to have his shit together, who seems to be successful, but ultimately is just probably going to be coming apart at some point later on in his life. But you're just here to see him at his prime, and so he seems like what he's saying is so true and all that, but I think he's a false idol in that sense. I think he's a bad person, bad example, at least. I'm ironically working on a video about internet daddies right now. That's hilarious. That'd be great. Send it to me or something, yeah. Yeah, well, I'm not sure if there's much else to talk about. I should probably edit this video. You guys want to see? Should I stream myself editing? Oh, man. It's kind of draining to stream. I'm using a clip of your video in it. Oh, nice. That'd be sick. I feel like I'm at a very low point right now in terms of my internet presence, but I feel like this video I'm working on, while it might not be a huge success, I think it'll be good for viewers of mine. Like I guess I feel this way because I feel like most of my viewers seem lost as to what the fuck I'm doing. And, you know, I'd like to reel them back in. I'd like to win them over. But ostensibly, like overtly, I'm not doing this for the audience, but I'm doing it for myself, but I'm presenting it to for an audience. Like normally I limit how much of myself I put in videos. I limit how much of myself I present online because I don't want to be a personality-based channel. And I hope I'm not going to become that, but I also think that if I'm going to have an audience at all, I need to be a bit open and a bit candid, and I can't always be viewing myself as this artist who, people have to appreciate my work, my documentaries, my stories, and it's like I can't talk to people directly. It's almost like this false sense of thinking even if I don't think I'm better than anyone, I think it comes off that way when I can only post the highest quality abstract videos on my main channel. So that's what I'm breaking down. And I did this once before with a video called Finding My Identity, but I feel like this is just the continuation of that. And it's for the purpose of grounding myself. So yeah, anyways, I'm working on that. That'll be out later this week. Make more videos about Smash players. Yeah, I'm not interested in that anymore, really. I just don't care to put the time into those kinds of videos. But I want to make short videos that have some impact or meaning. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. And I suspect this will be on YouTube later. Part of this anyways, this conversation at least. All right, cool.